This MF, sorry, two. Did this MF just say tie light? Did this MF just say tie light? Can we get a tie light going in the chat? Can we get a tie light going? Oh my god, we got a Team Jacob in the chat. Oh my goodness. Goodness gracious. Rob is so polite when he eats no svagati. As we say in Croatian. Am I polite? I don't know. I was like intentionally playing up the sounds. Team Jacobs need to go to therapy. Men would rather be Team Jacob than go to therapy. Red Scary, thank you for gifting a sub, by the way, to Clueless. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is Team Edward territory. Come on, folks. You know I respect the marketplace of ideas. Okay? You know I respect a variety of different viewpoints. Let's not get greedy with that, though. Okay? There's a limit. There's a limit to the acceptable spectrum of discourse that we can have on here. Is your favorite part about Twilight how he gaslights every female with an earshot? Why is this guy in high school, though? Like, I understand he's eternally high school aged, though, but isn't it, like, hasn't he learned everything? Why is he in high school? You need to watch Twilight. I mean, I guess so. It seems like everyone had fun in the Discord watching it last night. He does explain, okay. He has to keep up appearances or else people talk. There's plenty of, like, first of all, he looks pretty old already. He could easily pass for early 20s. There's lots of young people that aren't in high school. Please do not watch the movie with us and then ask questions like, why is he in high school? He has to keep up appearances. Okay, yeah, or else people will talk. Surely there's other...
good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Oh snap, a whole heckin' year.
Oh my goodness. Bleep Plump Ben. Ben, thank you so much for the 12 months of Tier 1. I really appreciate you, Ben. Thank you very much. Even if he has to keep up appearances, what are they going to do? Fucking arrest him? He's literally like an ultra powerful creature of the night. What's going to happen? They want to get along with the humans. Okay. They have to be alive for eternite. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Female NATO is not happy about this. Some of these questions. I'm simply asking questions here, folks. I'm simply asking questions. He just doesn't want people asking questions because then Cullens would have to leave Forks. Oh my God, watch the film. It was not a burger that I was eating, by the way. It's just it's just like a sandwich, but on like a egg bun. That's all. It's just there was some salami, some pepperoni, cheese, lettuce, mayo. I wouldn't an egg bun. I wouldn't call that a hamburger bun. It's like a brioche. You can put hamburger on it if you want. You can use it for anything. I often eat it with just like with some butter on there. It's delicious. It's one of my favorite little snacks. There were a couple sesame seeds on there, yeah. Chin chin, by the way, buddy. I just said, oh, fuck. I just called chat buddy. What is with that? It's because I'm used to talking to my son. That's what I call him. I know we're friends and everything. I know we're friends and it's the friendship triangle and all that. That's maybe taking it a little far. I think we all agreed in the chat last night was that everyone in the movie is behaving normally and does normal stuff. Okay, well, I'm not going to argue with that. Everyone in Canada calls everyone buddy. That is true, but it's the main thing I call my son. So sometimes when I'm on autopilot, I just default to that. By the way, I turned my ring light down. The last couple of days I've been in like bright mode. I thought I was trying that, and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. I had to go back down to the lowest brightness level. I think this is better. Do I like Jersey Shore? I've never actually seen Jersey Shore. I've never seen Jersey Shore before. Jersey Shore is, and I don't say this lightly, a masterpiece. Yeah. Laguna Beach, no, I've never seen any of that stuff. Never seen any of that stuff. If you enjoy it, though, all the power to you. I'm a shore whore indeed. The pinnacle of reality TV. The highest tier of first date material. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Any of the OC heads in the chat. Now that's something I can get behind. Big OC head here. Big time OC head. Absolutely. Yeah, vividly remember. How is it like it's like almost 20 years since the OC was on TV? What happened in the last 20 years? How did that happen? That's fucking insane to me. I really remember in the early days of like when I moved to Montreal, I was living like on my own, going over to my girlfriend's place at the time and having big OC watch parties. We loved the OC. I don't know if I ever finished it too. It was really all about those first 2 seasons. Then it kind of went off the rails. It kind of went off the rails, didn't it? I didn't watch the whole last season where like Ryan becomes like Ryan becomes like a cage fighter, I guess. That it got too out of like the what drew me into it originally. The friendship with Seth and Ryan. The family dynamic. Because too many random wacky characters got pulled in there. The soundtrack. Snooki and JWoww did so much for feminism by being evil little goblin women who didn't cook or clean. What was that New Year's episode? There's that rich kid. I think his name is like Oliver, the evil rich kid who starts moving in on Ryan's territory. And there's like a whole episode on New Year's when he like runs up to the party and like Oliver's making virgin mojitos because he's like, oh, I'm in recovery and all that, and he's all like, ooh, I'm dangerous. And then Ryan comes in at the last moment on New Year's Eve for the New Year's smooch. Remember that one? No, you do not. Okay. I really remember that one. I remember when Snooki showed up at WrestleMania and was immediately better than like 70% of the women's roster. I was not watching wrestling at the time either. I remember that happening, but I was a lapsed wrestling fan at the time as well as not following Jersey Shore. So didn't see that one. I remember that, Rob, but don't think the name was Oliver. Was it? It was Oliver. How did I remember that? Oliver Trask. Ryan Atwood and Marissa Cooper had an epic midnight kiss. This is from cheat.com. 3 reasons the New Year's Eve episode of the OC still reigns supreme. Reason number 2, Ryan Atwood and Marissa Cooper had an epic midnight kiss. What's a New Year's Eve episode without a kiss as the clock strikes midnight? After Marissa Cooper, Misha Barton, told Ryan she loved him and got a thank you in return, she decided to ring in the new year at Oliver Trask's Tyler Handley party. After getting some advice from Haley about how one rings in the new year is the way they spend the rest of their year, Ryan and Seth raced against the clock to get to Oliver's penthouse. Ryan ran up multiple flights of stairs to be Marissa's midnight kiss with only seconds to spare. The entire OC soundtrack was so my shit back then. Totally outrun. They had like Death Cab for Cutie. I remember that was one of the first places that we talked about Franz Ferdinand yesterday. Franz Ferdinand Take Me Out, I think, debuted on the OC. This whole time y'all were talking about the OC, I was thinking it was Laguna Beach. No, I've not. Phantom Planet. Yeah, thank you. The whole time, yeah, no, I have not seen Laguna Beach. I'm not familiar with that. That Franz Ferdinand album was so good, Marina. It's so great. It's really tied into like a time in my life because that kind of music scene was it was like exploding in Montreal around 2004 when I moved here. And it felt like that was like the OC was like part of the sort of
You can count
soundtrack
on
for
me.
that.
You're gonna have good old Rob
So
to
it's really
talk you
tied
through
into
all
this time in my life when I was independent for the first
1
time.
year slubbin' to the rib show. No regards.
No regards. Thank you very much, Old Dutch, for the 12 entire months resub at tier 2. Really appreciate you, Old Dutch. Thank you. Thank you for that. Love having you in the community. But yeah, I guess that's the OC is really tied to me, like for me, to this very sort of nostalgic period of my life where it's like the first I moved out of my, my parents' house, my mom's house. I'm kind of independent for the first time. I'm in that transition from like late teenage years to early 20s. Kind of you're forming an identity. I was going out. My friend Dave had an 80s night at Jupiter Room in Montreal every Thursday night on Saint Laurent. We'd go there every single Thursday. Listen to 80s music and get drunk and come home just reeking of cigarettes because everyone still smoked. When you were a pop punk heartthrob. This was like the period right before I entered that whole lifestyle, Quinn Better. My friend Dave that I just referenced, who had that night at Jupiter Room, was the singer in a band. And around this time, someone like quit their band when they were on tour. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I can step in and fill that gap and join this like popular band. Oh man. And I did. And it totally changed the trajectory of my life. And somehow the OC is part of that. The OC is part of that moment. For me. That's why it's weird right now to think about, oh fuck, that was almost 20 years ago. That's really ridiculous. I was a third grader. I'm old as fuck, Marina. This is something I have to come to grips with. I know I don't look like it. I know you people look at me and you're like, what is this guy? Early 20s? Mid 20s? I know that's what you say about me. I get it. But not the case. I'm very old. It does make me do that face. You're young. I'm just a fresh-faced 19-year-old. Thank you, Squatch. You might be closer in age to my mom. 51. Oh my god. Wait, so how old are you, Marina? I'm 13 years younger than your mom. God damn it. Okay, I'm still slightly closer in age to you, Marina, I think, or it's about equal. Yeah, slightly older, slightly closer in age to you. Still got it. So what else do we got? We're talking about the OC. We did a little Twilight discussion. We love our triangle members pushing 40. That seems to be like the around the median age for most of the people in this community. Then we got the youth wing. We got a handful of Zoomers. A handful of Zoomers just to sprinkle on some interesting little youthful exuberance on top of that. As we explored yesterday in our the Dad Caucus, that's right. As we explored yesterday when we were going on and on about Jinkos and new metal and the early 2000s. Isn't media in the middle? Like there's a bunch of 60-year-olds. Okay, you're right. I don't know what I'm talking about, Quinn Better. When I think about like numbers and stuff, it just makes me scared and confused. I think Lyle swings the age up there. Is Lyle older? I don't know much about Lyle. Mysterious TRRS community member and episode reviewer, Lyle Langley. I don't know much about this mysterious figure. I miss Lyle too. Red Scare, you're June 7th? Doc's June 19th. We got Gemini Squad. Gemini Gang. It is a Gemini heavy community. Seems like this chat doesn't understand means, medians, and standard deviations. No, I do not. Again, I don't even want to talk about it because it's making me feel uncomfortable to think about like numbers and math and stuff. A lot of numbers floating around in old Rob's head here. It's very confusing. June 8th for Praxid. Good. It makes sense because Rob is a Gemini stellium. A lot of Gemini traits, so all the Geminis are flocking. I guess that does make sense. Using my non-cult leader traits, bringing people in there. What's up, Ms. Squatch? We got a 1985er. Very good. The witchcraft wing of female NATO. Cult leader who calls his flock Bud. Yeah, don't get used to it. Okay? Don't get used to it. That was a one-time thing. That was a one-time deal. It is funny to call people buddy in like a condescending way too. Like, you know, I say it to my son, like, I say, "Hey, good morning, buddy." You know, talk to him like that. But it's funny to say it in like a condescending way as well. Like when someone cuts you off in traffic or whatever, and you're like, "Yeah, okay, buddy." That's fun too. That works as well. Rob's my buddy. That's right, Maxie. Should Marcus Smart be executed publicly for diving on Steph Curry's leg and then jump kicking Klay Thompson? I actually didn't see the play, but I did see that Curry is out indefinitely, which is very unfortunate. Chief. Oh man, this guy's gonna flashback to that individual. Maybe you cannot cut me off when there's a fascist in the White House. Okay, buddy. How did that work out, by the way? My favorite part about that is when Biden was elected and immediately released all the kids from all the cages. Wasn't that nice? I gotta admit, we called that one wrong. Did not expect that. Yeah, we got one game with Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Yeah, that's tough too. they had that nice moment, right? Quinn Better, they were like hugging like after the game because they were so happy to be together again after like 1,000 days or something since the last time they were on the court together. That sucks. I'm sorry about that, Quinn Better. But I guess there was like, when I was reading about it, there was like no significant injury, so he shouldn't. It's not like he needs surgery or anything like that. They should be able to get him back. I did watch last night the Raptors game. Little 5-game road trip win streak happening right now. Humiliated LeBron a couple nights ago, and then last night pulled one out against the Clippers. That's been very enjoyable. They're hitting their stride right at the right moment. I was a little worried after the All-Star break. They came out very flat. They got some injury problems. They had a couple of very tough losses to the fucking Pistons again. And the Magic at home. And then they go on the road and they beat Phoenix, Denver, San Antonio, LA, both LA teams. He is an all-LA talent, Kijiji Genie. He's playing fucking great. He's playing like he hasn't played like this since like 2019. I'm really happy to see it. Really happy for him. He took a lot of criticism. Pascal, in the bubble and last year's playoffs and last season. Or sorry, they did not make the playoffs last year, obviously. A lot of slander, a lot of Pascal slander, and he's proved all the haters wrong. He's not a fraud, Quinn. Better take that back. It's not. That's ridiculous. He's averaging like 22, 8, and 5 this year. Amazing season. He's going to be in the All-NBA conversation. Talking about the NBA when March Madness is on. See, I'm not a big college basketball guy. Rob can relate to being slandered and then rising from the ashes. E.g. Joe posting. That's right. I know what it's like. I know that feel. Yeah, he just looks great. And Scotty Barnes, superstar in the making. This kid's 20 years. He's 20 years old, folks. Scotty Barnes is 20 years old. He's playing like a 8-year, 10-year veteran, taking over games on both ends of the floor. This guy was supposed to not be able to score. He's a very crafty scorer. He's getting big buckets at the end of games. He's frustrating LeBron into like whipping the ball at him in mid-game and making him like want to cry. 20 years old. So hyped that he's on the team. I don't know if they'll get out of the first round of the playoffs. I mean, I hope so. They're definitely going to be a tough out in the first round of the playoffs, the Raptors. I don't know if they'll get out. I mean, they may be playing like... They just moved into a tie with the Sixers right now. If they can hold on to that 6th spot, they'd be playing right now, they'd be playing the Bulls, who are kind of like collapsing a little bit. The Bulls are kind of... The Bulls were playing really, really well, and they're kind of collapsing a little bit. I think they could probably beat the Bulls in a 7-game series. Playing the Celtics would be tough. The Celtics defense this year is really good. Playing the 70s, I don't really want to play James Harden and Joel Embiid in the playoffs. That would be really tough. I like the matchup with the Bulls. I feel pretty good about that. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll get out of the first round. It really depends on how things shake out. Scotty Barnes averaging 19 points post All-Star break with a 20% usage rate. It's kind of crazy. Well, it's wild. They don't run any plays for him. And he's so crafty and smart with the way he plays, and he just finds a way to get his stats. Oh, that's a good point, Quinn Better. James Harden, that's true. In the playoffs, he's known for completely fucking off. That is true. I mean, he is really good, but he doesn't seem to have that like winning, the psychotic drive to be a winner as some of the great players do. You think they're fucked? That's interesting. I'd be interested to see. I mean, they're probably better off getting Harden than Ben Simmons, who is not playing. I could never step foot on the court again there without being booed off the court. So we're going to get the exact same post-game press conference situation with the Sixers. Sorry you just showed up for the Sixers slander, Super. Again, I don't really want to play them in the playoffs, but now I'm getting a little bit sold on this argument by Quinn Better about this. Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't know if the Raptors are going to get out of the first round, but definitely are going to be a tough out. They're going to be a tough out. People keep trading Seth Curry and they keep regretting it. It's crazy how much of a valuable role player he's become, yeah. Raptors win over Denver was impressive. Jokic just a total beast. And again, Squatch, it was Scotty Barnes. 20-year-old Scotty Barnes, who was frustrating Jokic and helped completely shut him down in the fourth quarter. This kid's 20 years old. It's amazing. Their offense is now Harden dribbles for 22 seconds and then George Niang jacks a three. I really don't watch. I mean, I don't watch any other games except the Raptors, so I only see teams when they play the Raptors. I should be paying more attention to this, though. I haven't watched sports in years. I just choose a favorite team and say, go that team whenever sports talk is happening. I guess that makes sense, Super. Amazing how this young adult who's in prime fitness is good at sport. But pissed, you understand, though, that like there's kind of a hierarchy there. And like there's a big difference between being athletic and really good at something, as any young NBA player is. They're one of the best people to do it, probably in their, in their school and where they grew up. They're elite athletes. But you're showing up where there's professional athletes that have been doing it for years and years. It takes often these young guys, no matter how good they are, to like figure that out and figure out how to thrive within this. They're not playing with like other high school kids or other college kids. They're playing with like ultra elite, like the absolute best of the best people to do it. And a lot of young people, even no matter how good they are, they kind of shrink. They kind of shrink from this moment, right? This is the impressive thing when you see people like Scotty Barnes who just don't have any of that. No intimidation. They just waltz right in and start playing exactly like they belong there. Psychologically, I think that's a difficult place to get to. Not everyone can do that. Been watching a lot of other teams this year because Portland has been having issues. It's not too late to become a Raptors guy. Squatch. It's not too late. If you're looking for a scrappy underdog playoff team, I'll never give up on my Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are amazing this year. The Grizzlies are so good. And they're set up very nicely for the next couple of years. The hard part is finding out how to take over games and carry your team. Michael Jordan was 27 when he won his first championship. I guess that's exactly why I'm really excited about having Barnes on the team. And how it's like, oh yeah, he's 20. Because when he is 27, he's going to be just like a fucking superstar. He's nowhere near the prime of his abilities. This is what's very exciting about being a Raptors fan right now. You can have Dwayne Casey back, though, from a Pistons fan. Oh, no. No, thank you. that's a big no for me. Although it's been so frustrating, old driver, that the Raptors they've been swept by the Pistons now 2 seasons in a row. Because Dwayne Casey, it's like the only time he gets this team to play well is like when the Raptors are in town. He has some kind of like psychological obsession with humiliating Nick Nurse. For those of us unaware of basketball, can we see a video of you playing basketball for reference? I'll see what I can do. See what I can do here. Let me see. Is this what you're referring to? Oh, I'm sure there's people in here that didn't think that I could hoop. Once again, there's doubters in the chat, haters and doubters in the chat that didn't know that I could hoop. Well, well, well. Well, well, well. Old Dutch Bull Durham is great. Is this Rob Rousseau or Rob Ori? Oh, you didn't think I could hoop, did you? Very interesting. Inside courts are so depressing for me. It's actually like, this is one of the, I love being, I've never got an opportunity to do this. When are you going to show up at a combine event and get drafted? Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be, it's going to be one of those like Disney movie situations. If there's like a lockout, I'll be one of those scab players that comes on and gets to live my dream. No, I won't. I wouldn't be a scab. That's not true. I need to see some crossover game or complete one skates if need be. I don't have a very good handle, only fact. I'll admit that. I don't have a very good handle. What I do have is a decent outside shot, though. So once you hit a few outside jumpers, you can bring in a defender because they want to get in your face, and that's when you can blow by them, right? Because they've got to respect the jumper. You can get into the lane, then often you got an open pass. You get an open pass to a teammate, or you can get a little floater or a layup. Why are you streaming when you could be locking down your fadeaway right now? In all honesty, big shiny takes, Eric. I'm going to get back into hooping this summer. Okay, this is my promise to you. This is my promise to the community. It's been a few years since I've been able to hoop. Since my son was born, I must admit, I've kind of let myself go a little bit. I have not been keeping up on the hooping. This summer, though, I will be hooping again. This is my commitment to this community. All right? This is my commitment to you. I will be hooping again. Inside courts are so depressing to me. I don't know why. This was honestly... Oh, yes, I do have the dad belly. We don't need to get into that. This was actually like... Because around this time, I was playing each week like with people. I had like a whole crew that I would go with. We rented out this gym and we would go and play pickup. We would go play pickup ball for a couple hours each week, which was really fun. But there was two times, like towards the tail end of that run, where 2 weeks in a row, just like no one could do it, but the gym was rented out, and so I got to just be able to go to the gym by myself and just shoot jumpers for like 2 hours, which I was just like in heaven. Like I would like nothing more than to be able to have the option to do that, just to go to a gym by myself and shoot jumpers like that. That's like so psychologically healing for me. That's like my zen. That's my zen moment, you know? That's where I'm getting my zen. It's like my meditation. When you're just sitting there shooting jumpers, it's like my mind just goes totally blank. My mind just goes totally blank. I'm just thinking about hooping, and that's all. As long as you can do the fake Euro pass as you slash to the hoop after the pump fake on the perimeter, that allows for 87% of white basketball players to get away with a lack of ball handles. I absolutely do that, only fact. Yeah, the ball fake, or head fake, you get that step, get in, there's a teammate there, it's, whoa, gets the defender like that, and then, whoa, layup. That's the move. That's the old guy at the gym move. I still have that. I still have that ability. I need to send you a link to some Instagram videos I used to take of myself at my gym Lifetime, which is a chain of gyms in the USA, a rather high-end one of which LeBron goes to in NYC. My point is, yes, shooting hoops alone in an indoor court is euphoria. I get to be a kid again. There's just nothing better. There's just nothing better. I love it. I was just like, I have a bunch of videos because that's the thing. I was just in a gym by myself, and I was just like, I'll take some videos I can take a look at my jumper form. And I was just in there for like 2 hours, just shooting jumpers, shooting jimmies. Amazing feeling. So I'm going to get back this summer. I'm getting back to being a hooper. All right. Perhaps I can do some kind of hoop stream. I've seen certain other popular streamers do hoop streams. We heard of the classic film Hoop Dreams. This is going to be a hoop stream. Someone mentioned last time we talked about this that we could start some kind of fitness channel in the Discord, which I think is a great idea. It is. We should encourage each other to get back in better shape. We should do this. Shit, and Pissed is challenging me to one-on-one. The thing is, Pissed, I'm very out of shape. Yes, I can hoop, but I am extremely out of shape. I must say, you would probably beat me in a game of one-on-one right now. I would need a few weeks to like get back into game shape. I would need to set a date in the future and be working towards it. I couldn't just show up. I would be gassed in literally probably 15-20 seconds of playing. I can hoop in 1 minute bursts. Are you the hoop lord when you're in shape? No, I wouldn't say that I'm a hoop lord. I mean, that's taken a little far. I can play, though. I can play a little bit. I'm not a great defender, okay? I don't have a great handle. I'm not the biggest guy out there. I can shoot a little bit. And I've got a high b-ball IQ. I can usually I can get a nice pass or two. I can drop dimes. I didn't look in Fit Check for a long time because I thought it was about fitness. There was a 70-plus-old-year man at our gym that used to swoosh a good 90% of all his shots, not even exaggerating. He had the get-up of the short shorts, the long socks, and white New Balances. He was impressive. There's one of those guys at every gym, isn't there? There's one of those guys at every gym. Student of the game. That's right, Meow Mix. Well, this is always my thing, too, because it's like, if you're having a hard time getting it going, and if you're playing a game, and, you know, maybe you miss a few shots, you're getting a little discouraged, focus on getting your teammates involved. Try to get a few easy buckets. Try to find someone cutting to the lane. Get a few dimes. That's a good way to kind of change your mindset. This is an important thing to remember. Set a hard screen. It can be as easy as that. It's so funny to spend time talking about this on Twitch. It's funny to me that people watch this. It's amusing to me that people watch me talk about this. No judgment, you know, if it's whatever you enjoy it, you know, I'm happy to have you here. It is funny to me, though, that I'm sitting here talking about hooping. My hand-eye coordination is not the best, is why I prefer being a defensive player. Totally ruined someone's pass, but catching a pass for me. Yeah. I was never a great defender. I'm a little slow on my feet. I know you wouldn't think this to look at me, but yeah, I'm a little bit. Not my best. I try, but it's not my best quality when I go on the court. Hooping is actually subversive communist code for, yeah, this dangerous new trend. You don't want when your teens are talking about hooping. Here's what they really mean. How's the post game? I got some crafty moves. I've got a little jump hook, Meow Mix. I've got some crafty post moves. The up and under. The classic Kevin McHale up and under. The head fake, pivot. What? Whoop. Are we going to watch Pelosi read Bono's poem about Ukraine? We probably have to. I was definitely planning. I was queuing up the tweet about that. I heard actually once Pelosi announced that she was going to read that poem from Bono, that Putin immediately resigned in disgrace. This is what's going to get it done. Not sending arms and Stinger missiles and getting the CIA to train these like stay behind right-wing militias. It's this kind of tactically deployed cringe. This tactically deployed cringe will just make Putin be like, please, no more of this. Not Bono. Please. Yes, Sinchel. By the way, Sinchel, I wanted to ask you. In the Discord server, you shared that tweet from Will Menaker about the bar that they were at in Texas. Was that you? Was that a response to your tweet, or was that just someone else? Kente cloth for Ukraine. They would just immediately have to stop the invasion. Immediately. Nothing they could do. Yeah, I will do anything if you just stop this right now. No, that's someone who actually had tickets. Okay, I was just wondering. Because I was like, oh, I followed them forever. And I thought that was maybe you. I thought it'd be kind of interesting. China finally ends its neutrality to weigh in on that conversation and go, we would also like that this stop. Yeah, please. um shit. When is this happening? When is this shit going down? And for anyone that thinks that we're joking here, when is this going down? Love having our old as dirt 80-plus-year-old politicians decide who lives and dies in this country. It's wonderful, isn't it? Pelosi says she'll read a poem by Bono
good old Rob
about Ukraine at lunch today.
All this.
2 months to my Fav ML streamer.
Thank you, Yashbutt. I really appreciate that. The 2 months of Tier 1, thank you very much. You know, I've talked about this before. I don't know if I would describe myself as a Marxist-Leninist. If you watch the stream, obviously I'm sympathetic to Marxism-Leninism, absolutely. I think in order to like call yourself Marxist-Leninist, you should be part of like a revolutionary party, which I'm not. I'm just some dipshit journalist guy like that talks about like hoops and the OC and anti-imperialism stuff on Twitch. But yeah, I think if you watch my content, you can probably tell I'm quite sympathetic to that particular ideology. In any way, though, I do really appreciate the support, Yash. But I describe Rob as a student of Marxist by osmosis. I think that's a completely wrong description, and you're just cutting yourself short. Oh, you think so? You think so, Crackety Kraken? It's just my personal belief, but it's kind of splitting hairs. That's true. We don't have any real revolutionary organizations in the English-speaking West. I mean, we have the Canadian Communist Party, and I'm very sympathetic to the Canadian Communist Party in terms of like their actual like party line. I'm pretty on board with that, and usually I when it comes to a lot of these geopolitical events, I pay close attention to what the Canadian Communist Party is saying. But I'm not a member. I've thought about it plenty, becoming a member, but like I've talked about it before, I also like to have the sort of independence that to not have to be like beholden to anybody when it comes to like kind of doing commentary. So I'm definitely I'm a sympathizer. I'm a fellow traveler, as they say. Not a member. The closest I get to any revolutionary organized community group trying to keep a plaza here in DC open to public use and not to be redeveloped for luxury condos like they want. I mean, that's something, though. That sounds great. Oh, and by the way, someone asked what we were going to talk about today. And so we did the chit chat. I talked about hooping. I talked about the OC, the NBA, some of my on-court strategies for my hooping career. We are going to talk about we'll follow this Pelosi thing and some of the other horrible discourse we've seen about Ukraine. But also what I wanted to do today, and we're going to actually kind of get to this soon because I gotta leave at 3:30 today. But I want to listen to this recent episode of the War Nerd Radio War Nerd podcast about sanctions and economic warfare and what these sanctions against Russia are going to look like and the possible downstream consequences of this sanctions regime that's going on right now. DSA too, but they're not very revolutionary. I mean, we've talked about, and there's an amazing thing about DSA right now is like the international committee who I've talked about on the show a lot, who take a lot of really, I think, important and principled foreign policy stances. And I think their stance on this whole Russia-Ukraine issue has been excellent. And it's been so alienating for people. I'm seeing all these tweets from people being like, "Oh, I'm resigning from DSA because of their outrageous Ukraine position." And it's just like, bye. Bye. It's actually, I think the more people that are like alienated by that are leaving organizations like that is probably for the best. Salad person, are the tankies in the room with us right now? Are you okay? Is everything okay over there? I have to go buy groceries today, and I really don't want to. I empathize quite better. What's the mask rules? What's the mask mandate situation over there? Is it just getting totally dropped right now? Just started reading Black Marxism by Cedric Robinson with the DSA here. It's been really great so far. That does sound really great. So here's what. Yeah, we can focus on some of these terrible Ukraine takes, and then I wanted to talk about sanctions. I want to talk about the result of these sanctions and what that's going to mean for the people in Russia, what that's going to mean for people in the West, and how it could possibly lead to destroying our own economy. How does that sound as a little plan? Honestly, we should make DSA more revolutionary. That seems like a better way forward tactically than siding with CPUSA or promoting more intra-left fights. Well, and that's why I really appreciate what International Committee on DSA is doing right now. By taking these stances. And how people are getting so upset about it too. Like, oh, I can't believe why are they talking about NATO right now? And I think, yeah, the more kind of squishy NATO sympathizing anarchists and like quote unquote socialists that are leaving as a result of that, I think it's ultimately going to be a positive development. I think it's better to have probably a smaller organization of people that actually have these ideas and firm principles, especially when it comes to anti-imperialism, than a large organization filled with all kinds of different traditions and people from different political philosophies that are all just going to argue and complain all day. Are you going to listen to the interview with Ben Arris? So that's what I was planning on doing. He had a pretty interesting op-ed at his outlet, NEE IntelliNews, about the winners and losers of the conflict. Basically, China wins, US wins a little less, Ukraine loses no matter what, Russia loses no matter what, the global south will starve, everyone else will drown in inflation. Seems about right to me. Yeah, so that's a spoiler, I guess. Spoiler alert for what we're going to talk about today. But yes, that does sound about right. Anti-communists can't decide which is worse, communists having 0 electoral seats or having a vast majority of electoral seats. That's right, both are bad. Only true socialists, you have a small amount of seats and 0 power, and you lose all the time. That's what socialism is. That's what real socialism, that's what real non-tanky socialism is. Just when you get your fucking ass kicked for generations, and you accomplish nothing, but you feel very morally principled. That's what real socialism is. As soon as you start winning, that's really bad. You can't have that. You don't have any of that. It's only when you just lose and lose and lose forever, but feel morally superior to everyone. That's the only way to be a real leftist, a real non-tanky leftist. As soon as you win, oh no. Oh my goodness, you can't have that. Typical Stalinist BS. Why can't we get rid of people who still have illusions in the USSR and Soviet-style socialism? It kind of sounds like you're advocating for Stalin-style purges, Rombrecht. Who's the Stalinist now? You're talking about purges. That sounds really serious. Sounds pretty authoritarian to me. Why do the communists have 0 seats? Well, probably because we live in an extremely right-wing country that has been inundated with anti-communist propaganda for the last century, which you seem to have swallowed a lot of yourself, salad person, as well as fellow chatter Rombrecht. Seems like you've been guzzling from the cup of Western chauvinist propaganda for years and years and years, and you seem to have some incorrect ideas about certain things. Some cool new guys in the chat today. We love it. Salad person is immune to propaganda. I'm trying to think of a title for this segment. .007 is such a cool thing to put at the end of your username. It's true. I'm doing West-splaining whataboutism once again. Rombrecht, come on. Come on now. What are we doing here? What are we doing here, Rombrecht? What's this all about over here? I'll just go with this again. This worked yesterday. I'm gonna stop agonizing over this. I really do need to see the I really do need to see this Pelosi clip though. Has that dropped yet? Oh fuck, I spelled it wrong. No one clip this. Fuck! It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. Jesus. This is true. This is going to impact the productivity, and I want to leave time to make sure that we have the ability to get to this podcast, the Radio War Nerd podcast. Has there been an update on this, though?
And that's what is another way we can get that done, and that's what people are looking into. What you saw yesterday was history. Later at the lunch, just maybe you might want to watch, I'm going to be reading a poem written by Bono about Ukraine, which you might find interesting.
Madam Speaker.
This is another way we can get that.
Why isn't Nicole streaming while Rob is streaming? It seems mean. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that... It's very interesting, actually, that Nicole actually changed the time of her stream. She used to stream later, and weirdly pushed it back to a time right when I'm doing it at the same time. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, though. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. I just don't understand why there are any people out there who still see any future in so-called Marxism-Leninism. Its tendency that lorded over completely undemocratic societies, the majority of which have collapsed due to the internal contradictions of the Soviet system. Number one, Rombrecht, you're ignoring the role that the West played in like deliberately undermining all these countries. They spent billions and billions of dollars and spent decades deliberately trying to undermine this project. You can't just hand wave that away. Number two, big question here. Have you ever heard of a country? I know you must not be familiar with this. Have you ever heard of a country called China? Because I still see a future, actually, a country that is adhering to, in their way, with their own characteristics, their own Chinese characteristics, adhering to this system while becoming the predominant number one global economy. They're on the verge of accomplishing this. And, engaging in these, like, really incredible achievements, eliminating extreme poverty, building these massive, massive infrastructure projects that are just completely unthinkable in our own society. You have countries like Cuba, which is still thriving to this day, despite being poor, despite being under the boot of Western imperialism for decades now. Historical analysis, history only goes back 30 years. Yeah, and completely undemocratic, unlike our society now, which is like extremely democratic, right? I mean, the historical analysis says in 1991, more than 10 European countries have the chance to make their own elections after the Soviet oppression, and nobody protests against the capitalist system change. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. There were absolutely protests. This is an extremely unpopular project, both in Russia and in Ukraine. No one protest. I don't think that's accurate. I think you're spreading fake news. Check the shit out. Check the shit out. Here's a map. Fuck. Sorry, it's not working. My map is not downloading properly. Why is this not working here? Here we go. This should work here. Here's Ukraine in 1991. And the question that was being asked in this survey here, this is a referendum in Ukraine, 1991. Do you want to keep the USSR as a union of sovereign republics with equal rights? That's what Ukrainians thought in 1991. This idea that there is no protest, that's just completely historically not accurate whatsoever. Or saying that it's a conspiracy theory that the West intervened in these states to deliberately expedite this process. That's just an absurd statement. And why it became capitalist without an overthrow or something. There was an overthrow. In Russia, Yeltsin overthrew the Russian government with help from the US. This is very well documented. Literally overthrew. Guess the Russian government with guess what? Tanks. With tanks. They literally did a coup on the Russian government using tanks. Which was actually a massive human rights disaster. This was a massive human rights disaster in which living standards plummeted for people in Ukraine and people in Russia. Destroyed millions of people's lives. I don't see how the USSR, and certainly China, doesn't seem to be on the path to socialism. Well, I'm sure you know better, Ron Brecht. I'm sure you know better than the hundreds of millions of dedicated Chinese communists that are currently building socialism in their own country. I'm sure you must know better, right? Why don't you go? Here's what I recommend to you. Why don't you get on a plane and you can fly over to China and you can find some of these fake Chinese communists that you're referring to, and we'll sit them down and explain to them how they're doing socialism improperly, and they're not actually on the path of socialism, and explain to them what they're doing wrong, and you can give them your advice about what you think would be the best course of action, and I'm sure they're going to be really open to hearing about this from you. This is what I would suggest to you. Go and get on a plane. You can go tomorrow. Get on a plane and go sit one of these fake socialists down in China and really sit them down and explain to them what they're getting wrong about this. Define socialism for me then. How about no? How about that? Okay, I'm happy to engage with some of the fine folks that come in here to talk about the channel. This is not debate club, though. This is not debate club. Okay, and we're already getting far away from the actual subjects that I wanted to talk about today while we're having this discussion. So, no thank you. What I suggest to you is, instead of rather having Twitch streamers who are not interested in talking to you explain what socialism is, again, very easy. Get on a plane, fly over to China, or Cuba if you want, or Laos. Go fly over there and explain to them how they're doing socialism wrong and correct their bad, incorrect ideas. I'm sure they're going to be very happy to hear from you. Okay, here's something else that I wanted to talk about. I'm sure everyone saw this morning. A couple things that I wanted to talk about, and then we'll listen to this Radio War Nerd podcast. I'm sure everyone saw this. It seems like, a couple weeks ago there was that this huge stream of incredibly racist statements that were made regarding this war, saying like, "Oh, I'm, this is not some country. This is not some. We're not used to seeing war happen in like real civilized countries like this. This kind of stuff. This idea just hand waving away the decades of conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and Syria and elsewhere, being like, yeah, of course war is happening there. This is like a civilized European country." And it seems like there was some kind of memo went out, so people stopped doing that. And then Julia Ioffe, or whatever her name is today, really got back on it. Really got back on the horse. She somehow missed that memo. Did we see this clip? Let's check this out.
Seems like fertile ground for a false flag operation. So what is NATO going to do if, it's one thing for sarin gas to be used on people in faraway Syria who are Muslim and who are of a different culture. What is Europe going to do when it's on European soil? Done.
So I'm going to I can tell the volume is really low. I'm going to boost the volume a bit. She apparently didn't get the memo. She didn't get the memo about this.
Seems like fertile ground for a false flag operation. So what is NATO going to do if, it's one thing for sarin gas to be used on people in faraway Syria who are Muslim and who are of a different culture. What is Europe going to do when it's on European soil, done to Europeans? Are they going to intervene?
Wow.
Are they going to keep standing back?
I guess Syrians or Muslims aren't regular people.
And are they willing to have a direct confrontation with Vladimir Putin, which is what he seems to want?
Fucking amazing, isn't it? Communism is not a thing. Okay. Good. Yeah. So it's amazing. There's been a couple days with a lack of comments like this, and now we're back doing this. They're from a different culture. That's right. This isn't like Syria or Libya, where it's just part of their culture to just, gas attack each other. This is a civilized country. She used the word Muslim to mean non-white. Yeah, that's right. Can you change the header to insane in the Ukraine out of respect for Ireland's proudest rapping sons on this holy feast day? Oh, what's that clip? This isn't about Ukraine, but this is important, though. I think I have the clip saved right here. Oh my goodness, I do.
UK want to be a part of Ireland.
Why do you think English people know so little about Ireland?
Ignorance is built into our culture. Always from the start of...
Oh, I'll turn off my... Sorry, I put that boost. This is shout out to our Irish comrades. One of the best clips of all time.
UK want to be a part of Ireland.
Why do you think English people know so little about Ireland?
Ignorance is built into our culture. Always from the start of time, from they fucking started taking over every country in the world, they refused to learn their history and refused to come to terms with. That's the difference between Germany. After the World War, they learned everything about the fucking World War, and now they've come to terms to the fact that, alright, the Nazis were a thing. The best thing we can do is acknowledge it and get over it.
Not totally accurate there, but we're going to forgive them for this. But this next part is where it comes from.
Whereas the Brits just want to just hide their past because they'd feel too guilty. Ignorance is built into our culture. always from the start of time, from they fucking started
That is a
taking
good
over
emote.
every country in the world, they refused to learn their history and refused to come to terms with it. That's the difference between Germany. After the World War, they learned everything about the fucking World War, and now they've come to terms to the fact that, all right, the Nazis were a thing. The best thing we can do is acknowledge it and get over it. Whereas the Brits just want to just hide their past because they'd feel too guilty.
I mean, talk about our whole conversation the last couple of days about the World War and the alliance with, you know, the Nazis that the U.S. formed, which is when I've seen quite a lot of discourse about this recently. That's part of it, right? We don't want to learn their history. There's people in the chat that don't want to learn the history. It's very unfortunate. I know it makes you feel too guilty. And you want to project this chauvinistic idea on all these other cultures. They're the real monsters. You know? We're bad. We do some bad stuff, not like these other really terrible countries like the USSR. It's because you're not acknowledging your real history. You're not acknowledging the real history. The history of colonialism. The history of fascism, which we founded. We wrote the book on this in the West, along with the British. Right? But we don't want to learn about it because it makes us feel too guilty. We do bad, but have you seen China and Russia? That's it. That's the chauvinism. That's the chauvinism that we love and that we know and love. More Irish content. Kind of all over the place today. Sweet. I don't think you're my enemy. I think it's just unfortunate that there are still so many leftists who have illusions in a political philosophy that is, in my humble opinion, quite counterproductive for achieving a communist society. I hope you can still talk. I confess that I get frustrated. No harm meant. Ron Brecht, one question for you, though. How old are you? Just out of curiosity, okay? No judgment. No judgment. Okay. All right, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Let's just move on. Yeah, I did. In all honesty, I did expect you to be a teen because you have, in all honesty, and I'm sorry to tell you this. You have a childlike understanding of history and culture and society. And I hope that one day you can come to the correct beliefs and the correct opinions. Anyway, I'm not trying to be mean, though. I'm not trying to be mean. We're going to get back on track. I wanted to talk about sanctions. I got to get started with that soon. I guess, okay, here's the last thing that I wanted to talk about before we get to that. Okay? Okay, actually, two things. There's this thread from Boringstein. All kinds of opinions about this no-fly zone coming out. I could say the same thing about you. I mean, that's the core of disagreeing, isn't it? I guess, but I'm the one with the Twitch stream, and I'm the one that's on the camera with the microphone and stuff, so. I guess that's where I kind of come out on top on this one, unfortunately. Yeah, I love how people can make concrete statement that a no-fly zone equals nuclear war. Unless you can 100% accurately predict the future, you're talking out of your ass. Boringstein says, do you know what a no-fly zone entails? So, yep, having some balls. There's no more evidence that a nuclear strike will happen. As there is, it won't happen. Maybe there will be a limited strike. Maybe Russia will nuke Kiev just because he's losing the war. Point is, you don't know. What we do know is that Ukraine needs help. This is where our discourse is at. This is wonderful, though. This goes out to female NATO, this one, okay? This one goes out to female NATO. Why can't wanting a no-fly zone just mean stop flying your planes over Ukraine, Putin? Why must we conclude that if we tell Russia not to fly, that equals us having to shoot them down? That's how abusive men tell women, you made me do this. This one goes out to female NATO. I happen to agree with this, actually. I happen to agree with this. It's very simple. If you're asking for, Boringstein says, if you're asking for a NATO no-fly zone or NATO troops, you're asking for nuclear war. Good, we need to get rid of Russia. You are in Poland. Do you understand what would happen to you, radiation-wise, in this scenario? Yes, we'll finally put an end to the most cruel empire ever seen, Russia. I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel the heat of a nuclear device detonating in my city center. Hell yeah. Unfortunately, came back to the stream in time to see this. What the fuck? We've had all kinds of shenanigans and hijinks going on here, Outrun. We've had a lot of hijinks already. Decolonize the concept of nuclear war. Thank you. Thank you, Quinn Better. And here's the final thing that I wanted to look at. The final little tweet here that I wanted to take a look at. So this John Gann's character says, hopeful Ukraine and Russia draw up neutrality plan. They're drawing up a 15-point plan that would involve Kiev renouncing NATO ambitions in return for security guarantees. Hopeful a deal is reached soon, but this idiotic opinion that Zelensky should surrender to end the suffering of his people completely ignores that he is no doubt facing internal political constraints as well. He has to accept terms that are broadly acceptable to the Ukrainian public. If not, he might risk the government collapsing, even a coup, by those who want to continue to prosecute the war further. All of those right-wing malicious people wring their hands about on here would suddenly be totally unleashed. And I think John's here making an important point by accident. And Sam Sachs here clears this up, which serves as a corrective to the lazy analysis about the influence of the far right in Ukraine. So two things can't be true, okay? You can't just dismiss this far right element in Ukraine by saying, well, Zelensky's Jewish, extremists have no power in parliament. It's only a few hundred guys, right? That's what they keep saying. It's not even that big of a deal. It's a few militia guys. Zelensky's Jewish. They have no power. They have no influence. So you can't simultaneously think that and at the same time says, well, they can't do like a peace deal to de-escalate and guarantee neutrality when they're just going to get cooed by these right-wing militias. Right? These are two mutually exclusive ideas. The idea that like, oh, these guys don't even matter. There's only a few of them. It's not that big of a deal. Why are you focusing on that? And oh, by the way, they also can't do a deal that de-escalates and that carves out security guarantees for concessions because then they're just going to get overthrown and cooed by these right-wing guys. Right? Mutually exclusive. Take care, Miss Squatch. Thanks for stopping by. So I think that's just the last thing that I wanted to point out. Okay? The idea that
just
it's like...
become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness. Gen X Bushy, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. Look at that. Thank you very much, Gen X Bushy. I really appreciate that. This is the idea that I was trying to point out, though. Mutually exclusive. It's mutually exclusive to say, oh, none of these fascist militias matter. It's only a few hundred guys. Who cares? And they can't do a peace deal and de-escalate and give up on getting into NATO and stopping the war because these neo-Nazi guys will coup the government. This is the whole issue with what's been going on for the last 10 years, right? Like I've pointed out a couple times, Zelensky himself campaigned and was elected as being like, I'm going to de-escalate this. I'm going to de-escalate this conflict. Like there's lots of people in Ukraine that don't want to have this conflict in eastern Ukraine. But between NATO and these right-wing groups that were arming and funding, it doesn't seem like de-escalation was ever really an option until it got to this dramatic escalation by Putin. So this is the problem, is that, yeah, I think there's elements with either Zelensky himself or in the government that want to now de-escalate and stop the invasion and guarantee neutrality, guarantee that they won't become part of NATO in exchange for these concerted concerns. But I don't think this is possible. There's people within the military establishment in these militia groups and in terms of like the Western advisors that have been poking and prodding at this thing for the last 10 years, that to them, that is an unacceptable outcome. So you can't simultaneously say, well, these people don't even matter. There's only a few hundred of them. Who really cares? And then say like, oh, they can't actually do a peace deal because then these people will just say no. They'll not accept these terms. This is a big problem. Meanwhile, when you ask Palestinians, they're singing chants at a wedding about how Putin should keep attacking and saying China should invade Taiwan. Fuck, that clip is funny. And that's the kind of thing I've tried to focus on, Red Scary. It's like, you know, we pay a lot of attention to what the global south is saying on this show. And this is a case where we have to continue listening to what the global south is saying, particularly people, in Palestine, people in Latin America. It's very important that we pay close attention to what these folks are saying. Like we said the last time this came up, people in Central and South America know full well about the Yankee imperialist playbook and what happens to your country when the West comes in there and starts arming and funding all these right-wing goons in order to destabilize the country. Evo telling NATO to get fucked. Yeah, that was great. That was really great. Let's embarrass Rob with tons of subbies. I mean, Gen X Bushy. I mean, I wouldn't say no to it. I'll tell you that much. Wouldn't say no. In fact, I should probably take a moment to just shill for the stream, then I can take a 5-minute break, then we can listen to this podcast about sanctions. Okay? Because now I'm starting to run a little low on time, and I want to make sure we have time to get to everything. Folks, I need your help. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy this Twitch stream, if you enjoy my content, you must slub to rib. You know the common refrain that we hear here. Gets the subs up a little bit. I'll take a little break and we're going to listen to this podcast about sanctions and get to the bottom of what these sanctions are going to mean for Russia, what they're going to mean for the West, what they're going to mean for the global South.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Squatch Drew, thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs.
Good old Rob
thank you, Squatch
Drew. Talk you through all this.
just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I don't know, I feel like my alerts are like paused or something. I'm trying to pay attention to all this. I said thank you to Squatch Drew. Thank you very much, Squatch Drew. Thank you, Comrade Social Distancing, for the 2 gifted subs.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
I feel like there was way more alerts than what just happened. This is confusing. Freya, thank you for the 100 friend coin.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
My Friendship Triangle card is accepted by most Steely Dan approved merchants. That's good to hear. I'm wondering if they're going to capture the drum fills in this one. The drumming in this song is just absurd. Thank you, Comrade Metzia, for the gifted sub as well.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Red Scary, I will play the Palestinian chant. If we can get to like over 25 subs, I will play the Palestinian wedding song. Just as part of a journalistic...
We simply
This is take a
use
look
the
at
computer
it.
to mark up the size of the account.
Just to take a look at something that's its content that's floating around out there. It doesn't mean we endorse anything that's in there, but I think it's worthwhile taking a look, that's all. Cutman, thank you for the 100 friend coin. I know Dan is going on a tour. It's not really, like, let's be clear though, it's not really Steely Dan though. You know, I love Don Fagen. It's Don Fagen solo though. There's no Walter, so it's not really Steely Dan, but sure it would be still a really great show though.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Moist Towelettes, for the gifted sub. Where are the drums? That was pretty good, yeah. It's hard to groove to. I love it, but it's hard to groove to. We're a minute left out of the hype train, folks. A minute left. A minute left, very close to getting out of this level 3. Props to ever programmed this MIDI. This is serious shit. Seriously. got 30 more seconds, folks, and then I got to take a break.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Forcing my mods to gift subs. Wow. Outrun, thank you very much for the 2 gifted
You're gonna have a good
subs.
old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Freya, for the gifted sub as well.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Oh my goodness.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Oh my goodness. Cape Codminus, thanks for gifting a sub.
You've just
Red
become
Scary.
an elite member of the Friendship
You
Triangle.
really want to see this video, don't you? Thank you so much, Red Scary, for the 5 gifted
Count on
subs.
me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Sunny Gyrosol, thank you for the 2 gifted subs. this is my first time listening to this one Outrun. That was actually very good. Yeah, that was good. My goodness. What's insane is that Gad can chart this all out. Yeah, this is just a ridiculous drum part. Okay, I got 3 minutes left. I really do have to take a break, so I can just like go to the bathroom. And then can I take a break in the middle of a level 5 hype train? Is that like too crazy? Is that crazy to do?
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Oh goodness. What outrageous levels of hype. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Alana, for the 3 gifted subs. Yeah, in all honesty, Rombrecht, like that's the thing. It's like we can talk about what these things you're bringing up. We can talk about it all day. We can go back and forth all day about this. I just don't feel like doing it though. I just don't feel like doing it. I have other shit that I want to talk about. I don't want to get in this fucking endless conversation about like what socialism is and isn't. I find it annoying. There's plenty of reading you can do about this. A lot of these conversations that you're trying to have right now have been brought up many times in like hundreds of years ago and have been completely actually settled. Not necessary at all for me to like try and get someone back in. I don't think I'm going to convince you on this. I don't think I'm going to sell you on this right now. And there's other things that I want to do anyway. Then we would have to reply to Kautsky. Yeah. I'm trying to vibe out to Steely Dan midis right now. Right? Is that so wrong? Is it so wrong for me to do this?
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Oh boy, Squatch. Thank you, Squatch. I don't know if this may be a wasted gift sub, but who knows? I really appreciate that, Squatch True. Thank you. That sounds too much like the real song. No. That's the actual song. We don't want that. 30 more seconds. We're 1 away from the goal, folks. 30 more seconds. Okay, this is not what I want, though. Musically, this is not what I'm looking for. Okay?
Count on me and that good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thanks for contributing to the hype train, everyone. Thanks for supporting the show. I really, really appreciate it. You know, I saw Tanya Singh sharing this. Oh no, she's probably been fucking banned for sharing this exact video. So listen, I don't know what this is. I've not watched this video. I saw this as like a viral video. Okay. I don't know what it is. I don't endorse any of the views here. This is just a viral video. And because we're journalists, and I'm a journalist, I'm a serious journalist, and this is a show where we talk about the news and this kind of content. It's just pertinent. It's the kind of thing that we take a look at. So I don't know what this is. I don't know what is said in this video. I don't endorse any of the views in this following video. This is purely for journalism, is the reason that I want to watch this. Because it's a viral clip that's been going around. This apparently references some current events that are going on. How it references it, I don't know. But let's just check out this video, okay? Oh dear. I don't endorse this. I don't endorse any of this. I don't know what this is. Okay? I don't endorse any of this, any of these views. Okay? People were telling me that there was a viral clip going around that I should see, and that's all that was. We were just looking at it, and that's all. Like, I do not endorse any of what was just said in that video. Okay, I want nothing to do with that. In fact, I find it detestable. I find some of these views reprehensible, but I think we have to engage with it. We have to be aware that this stuff is floating around out there, right? Yeah, I find it reprehensible and offensive. I do believe we should, if there's stuff floating around, we should at least take a look at it, though. If that's what people in some other cultures are saying, even if we find these views reprehensible, we should still be at least paying attention to what is being said, okay? It's very offensive. I agree. That was very offensive.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Oh God, how did this get here? I am not good with computers.
Thank you, Comrade Social Distancing, for the 200 friend coin. Sorry you accidentally did that. I'll just be back in a moment, okay? Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to go to the bathroom. I'll just be back really quick. And we're going to listen to this podcast about sanctions. We're going to learn about these Russian sanctions. Okay? What's this poll? Better Raptors logo, full dinosaur dribbling our claws on ball. In all honesty, Outrun, I don't have a ton of nostalgia for the old logo. I like the old logo in short bursts. I like when they do it as a retro thing. I would go with the more modern logo. Remember at the time, at the 90s, everyone made fun of the Raptors logo because it looked silly. It was like a league-wide laughing stock. I think sometimes people get carried away with that nostalgia and they say that was better. It's not. I like it a couple times a year on the retro jerseys. Yeah, claws. I like to have the dinosaur dribbling the old 90s logo 3-4 times a year with the retro jerseys. And that's it. Okay. Like the Allen Iverson thing. We're talking about sanctions. We're talking about sanctions. Not the war. Not the war. We're talking about sanctions. Should I do a thing like Nicole does? Like if you gamble, you can gamble Robs? Should that be one thing that I could do with the clout points? Should you be able to gamble clout points? Could we do that? That would be good, right? The legend.
If a coach say I miss practice and y'all hear it, then that's that. I mean, I might have missed one practice this year, but if somebody say he doesn't come to practice, it can be one practice out of all the practices this year.
The legend.
That's enough. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. If I'm hurt, I'm hurt. I mean, simple as that. It ain't about that. I mean, it's not about that at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just talk about practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice. Not a game. Not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We're talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking.
He's a franchise player. Get off his back. Get off his back. If he can't practice, he can't practice. He scored 30 points a game. What do you want from this guy? And he's also mad because his best friend died and just no one cares. Yeah. The way AI was treated by the media and by the NBA was extremely racist, wasn't it? A lot of racism in the way that he was judged for his, like, his past arrest, the tattoos, the cornrows, the clothes, the jewelry, that kind of stuff. He was really judged very harshly by these, like, predominantly white journalists. He's carrying the team. Get off his back.
About practice. I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We ain't talking about the game.
Not the game.
We're talking about practice, man. When you come in the arena and you see me play, don't you?
Absolutely.
You see me give everything I got, right?
Absolutely.
But we talking about practice right now.
But it's an issue that you're
we talking about practice. Man, look, I hear you. It's funny to me too. I mean, it's strange to me too. But we talking about practice, man. We're not even talking about the game, the actual game, when it matters. We're talking about practice.
No, they won that series against the Bucks fair and square in 2001. I was so into that. I was
make my teammates better by practice.
I fucking loved Iverson so much at that time. When they beat the Raptors, I cheered for Iverson. I cheered for Iverson over the Raptors in that series. That's how much I loved Iverson. And in that first game against LA, that very first game, when he scores 50 and scores that big clutch jumper over Tyronn Lue, I was just losing my mind. I was just losing my fucking mind. I was so happy. It is true, yeah. The way the sports pundits use that not so coded language referring to AI as a thug and shit, it really was sickening. Yeah, it was. Vin Baker, yeah. He had a couple of very good years. Vin Baker. Yeah, that's the moment, Squatch Drew. That's right. Man, I was just in my living room in 2001 watching this, and I was just so happy. Look at that, just disrespecting Tyronn Lue like that. I loved this so much, and then I was devastated when. And by the way, they lost that in series in 5 after winning game 1 against the Lakers. They lost in 5. It was much closer than it was much closer than we remember. Those games 2, 3, and 4 were all like right down to the wire. Like that series really could have gone either way. It looked lopsided in terms of the result. All those games were very, very close. And it was Iverson and nobody. It was Dikembe Mutombo in the latter part of his years. Like who? Eric Snow, Aaron McKee. He had nobody else. He had no like number 2 option. Todd McCulloch. Who else is on that squad? And Iverson just fucking carried them all the way to the finals and beat them in game 1. Man, I love Iverson. No, this was before Korver was drafted. Yeah, maybe Theo Radcliffe, a rookie Raja Bell. Yeah, they had nobody on that team. I mean, these are all decent role players, but they didn't have like a number 2 option. Their number 2 option was Aaron McKee. Anyway, I've spent so much time talking about sports today. We're talking about sanctions. Not the war. We're talking about sanctions. So let's do that. I'm going to get some B-roll going on YouTube. I'm just going to get some B-roll happening. Just so we have something playing in the background. I'm going to put on this Radio War Nerd podcast about sanctions so we can hear about this. I don't know if we have enough time to get through it all. I don't know if we do at this point, but let's give it a shot, okay?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Radio War Nerd. The date today is March 7th, 2022.
Thorvin here. Thanks so much for the 5 months
and
of
this
Tier
is
1.
episode 320. I'm the ghost Mark Ames. I am in Rochester, New York, up on Lake Ontario, up in the north. And I'm on the line with John Dolan, a.k.a. the War Nerd, a.k.a. Gary Brecher, who has
this B-roll is confusing.
Not in Toronto anymore, right?
As Bill Murray said in Groundhog Day. Yeah, I'm in Montreal.
There we go.
I guess because Toronto wasn't snowy enough. Montreal's definitely snowy enough. And yeah, but we probably want to get to our interview, which is a real stunner. I mean, it really helped me a lot. All I want to say is that I mentioned briefly Bulgakov's novel about Kiev, the White Guard, in the course of the interview. And I recommended this before, but I recommend again that people
I could do
read
that, Dave Legend. It's a good idea.
A good sense of what's going on and why it's not likely that there'll be a happy outcome in Ukraine.
Yeah, the White and that is a reminder that one of our upcoming, we have a lot of episodes that we'd like to do, plus other stuff, but anyway, that are related to the Ukraine war. Today's is going to be about the sanctions, which is a form of warfare, and a great interview with Ben Orris, who was a previous guest of ours. But we also want to talk about the military situation again. We want to talk about insurgency, which is a big thing, and literature and so on and so forth. So we do have a lot to talk about in the coming weeks and months.
All too much.
All too much, I know. But anyway, let's get to our interview with Ben Arras to make some sense of the sanctions regimes and where they might take everybody. Okay, we are really honored to have back with us very popular and recent guest. I mean, it seems like years ago, centuries ago, but anyway, Ben Arras, he's the founding editor of B&E and Telenews. He was our guest in Radio Warner episode 316 on Russian gas pipelines and pipeline politics. That episode was released, I should say, or posted just on February 15th. I could have sworn it was 2 months ago or 3 months ago, but it was just a couple of weeks ago. But first of all, welcome back to the show, and thanks for coming back on, Ben.
Hey, Mark, John, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I mean, we all know what we're going to talk about today.
It seems like ages ago. It's like we've had like a century's worth of news in 2 weeks in the meantime, and surprise and shock and newsmaker one after the other. I've been writing like 14 stories a day, trying to keep up with it and failing. And there's just so much. It's going so fast. Yeah, and looking really black.
Yep. And we were all, I mean, we talked about this in our previous episode, or 2 episodes ago, I guess, anyway. I mean, we were all taken by surprise. I feel less sort of ashamed or whatever the word would be about it now than I did on that day. Now that I've seen that basically every Russia expert, everybody in Russia, everybody in Ukraine who has gotten everything else right until then, pretty much everybody who knows the place got it wrong.
Everybody in Beijing. That's what made me feel better. All right. If they couldn't figure it out in Beijing, I feel better.
But, and the people who got it right for once and their once and only time were the people who seemed to, the less you knew Russia in a weird sense, the greater the chance where you're going to get lucky on this one,
I agree with that too. It's like I felt a lot of that as well, but I just feel like I'm in terms of my stance on this leading up to this, I feel like I'm in fairly good company with the people that also kind of were wrong about this, and all the absolute worst fucking ghouls who know nothing got it right. That doesn't really make me feel like I need to reorient my own like geopolitical views or anything like that. I feel very good company with all the folks that I was going along with when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Military. Yes, the Putin haters.
The Putin haters have been hating him forever and saying he's evil and he's going to do something evil. Hitler, and he did. Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we were all, I mean, me too. I was caught out. We said, I think we discussed it last time. It's a basic step-by-step model where he's been ratcheting up the pressure piece by piece in a very telegraphed way so that you could see things coming. What we didn't expect was that he would go to such an extreme step of invasion so quickly. And I wrote several pieces because I was one of the people saying like, there's no way there's going to be invasion when they were hyping it in October, just saying like, count it out, because as long as the diplomacy is going on, because it's what it says on the can, he wants his security deal. And he's quite clearly incrementally increasing the pressure in order to provoke those talks. And he tried to get talks and a deal done in 2008 and was simply ignored. And this time we said that he successfully put it on the table, the talks began. And then there was a round in January with the States, which ended with that letter at the end of January that said no. And then there was a second round in February with Macron, where the emphasis changed to getting him Minsk II peace deal implemented, which basically delivers the guarantee, but a different mechanism. And then we wrote a piece when that came to an end saying that this is coming to an end. The next stage will be played with guns. But I was assuming that there were several intermediary steps. It's so extreme to invade. It does so much insane amount of damage that I thought he was going to move some missiles into Kaliningrad or maybe drop a bomb on an airfield or, just do little stuff that wouldn't bring down the whole sanctions,
really went for it,
but would make the point like it's going to get worse. There are going to be guns involved. But he went to full invasion.
That was the big surprise. He decided that he was going to be the one
really
to completely remake the chessboard, as they say, and people would have to react to him. And I think, I was talking about this a little bit just before we started recording. There was this surprisingly interesting interview in the Wall Street Journal with Robert Service, the very Cold War kind of Tory-ish historian. He's very level-headed about it. He said there were two major blunders. One was the West pushing
fucking losing
NATO,
it right
knowing it was a red line, and pushing well beyond red lines over and over, despite all the warnings, despite what everybody knew. And the second blunder by Putin, who assumed that the West could be divided. I could imagine this, knowing people I've known out there who were very powerful. I mean, these powerful people are like this kind of everywhere, but I know a specific Russian kind as well. But you can get arrogant, and think you're just a lot tougher and know how to play other people who are naive and not as smart and don't know the angles as well as you. And Putin clearly did that. I mean, we talked about in the last episode how Scholz, the German leader, wouldn't even commit to sanctions when he was right next to Biden. He wouldn't commit to them. So, it was a surprise to us. But then again, so was the invasion. It seems that the scale of the invasion shocked the West into uniting. And this is what, Service said, that, the surprise Putin got when he invaded Ukraine, when he found that he had inadvertently united the West, that what he'd done was the very opposite of what he wanted. I'm just going to read this paragraph. Service called Putin reckless and mediocre and scoffed at the notion he's some sort of genius. What kind of Russian leader, he asks, makes it impossible for a German leader not to build up Germany's armaments? It's pretty well said, I think, So what is?
I can't believe you didn't instantly believe the U.S. State Department. They've been so honest all the time.
What's the sort of general mood?
That's what I've been saying, like, since the shit kicked off. Like, I'm not going to take this incident and be like, oh, now I'm going to start believing these people when they say these things. It's like, no, I'm still going to continue to not trust them. The absolute ghouls in the U.S. State Department or with their friends in the Western media. No, I'm still going to continue to be skeptical of every single thing that comes out from these people. Nothing that's happening right now is going to change that.
So the politics of this out there right now.
It's as you say, I think everyone's had to recalibrate. I mean, before we dive into the nitty gritty of all of that, on the blunders thing, I agree that there's been an arrogance on the Western side that to refuse to engage with Putin, because as I've said in many articles I've written, that this is a step-by-step process that goes back to the verbal promises that were given to Gorbachev at the end of the Soviet Union that NATO would not expand, which was actually floated by Genscher, the famous German foreign minister who introduced the whole Ostpolitik and started the reunion or the warming of relationships between East and West. And at that time, Genscher said, look, we have to give the Soviet Union assurances that NATO won't expand because they'll freak out if it does. It's a threat to them. And then that held for a decade. But then around whatever it was, 97, 99, NATO started expanding exactly at the time when Russia was flat on its back from the 98 crisis. And it was, they can't do anything. It's destroyed. It's all over. Let's take in all these countries. And for perfectly understandable reasons. I mean, if you're Estonia, you're right on the Russian border, and you have a population of 1.5 million people. That's half the population of Berlin in the whole country. You need somebody else with a big stick to look after you. So, of course, they joined. And so they should. And as a sovereign nation, they have the right to do it. And Russia was unable to do anything. And it was that ignoring Russia's security concerns, because Putin's been banging on about this since 2003, that was just completely ignored. And our main blunder was that the NATO security infrastructure that is in Europe excludes Russia. It's an exclusionary policy. And Putin actually asked to join in 2000 to be included. But because we refused to even talk to him about
it's been bad for Enes Kanter's brand
deal that included Russia, because we in the West, America in particular, withdrew from one Cold War era security deal after another, starting with the ABM in 2003. All Putin saw was like NATO marching up to his borders, that the West getting out of all the obligations they had not to put rockets and what have you on the border, that Russia was explicitly excluded from the security infrastructure in Europe. And he started to panic because where does this end? And in that sense, what he's done now makes total sense because he feels under threat. And actually, there's no evidence to say that, we're not an aggressor, that we don't see him as an enemy. And so now he's reacted. He's reacted in a way that he's trying to ensure Russia's security. And for him, Ukraine joining NATO was a red line. And he's just absolutely not going to accept that, because the bottom line is NATO is like Cuba, that you put missiles on the Ukrainian border, which borders European Russia, where the bulk of the big cities are, where 80% of the population live, with missile flight times under 5 minutes, which is indefensible. You cannot defend against missiles that close. And he's like, I'm not accepting that. In the same way that JFK wouldn't accept missiles in Cuba. But that's old school politics. I mean, we can have a long discussion about how the world's changed and the Helsinki process and sovereign nations having the right to choose their partners, which is all true. So to conclude the whole conversation we're about to have, this is actually a test of that new world order. And I think that's what's motivated everybody, like the Germans, to suddenly act. Because Europe doesn't do this. Europe doesn't do it doesn't do crises. It doesn't react quickly with resolve and unity, and it has. And I think it's because the very system that we've been trying to build, this Helsinki-driven, shared values, rules order, international rules-based order, is being tested.
We love
in
that
a very
international rules-based order,
Putin,
folks.
Who wants to do it old school, spheres of influence, and as if there was an ideological divide between the two sides. And that's why the sanctions that have rained down in a catastrophic way in a matter of weeks, days even, have been so severe, because they need to establish this order. It's being tested, it's being challenged by Putin. And of course, the last thing I'll say is, in the background is China. If they don't crush this with Putin, then China's going to take Taiwan. So it has to be decisive, because they're fighting two battles here, the one that's going on now and the one that will be when China marches into Taiwan.
Who makes the rules? It's a good question, Granite Marcus.
So
who makes the rules and who's allowed to break them and who's not allowed to? That's the second question.
Yeah, it ain't worth it unless, of course, Taiwan. What's the red line for China again? It's if the U.S. Recognizes Taiwan's independence. So maybe we're going to do that. Knowing us, who knows? I mean, yeah, it's
take everybody into NATO, including Tonga and
everyone everywhere. Yes.
When I talked to Carl Joffre, he didn't seem to think that that's on the table right now.
Is this time we wanted to talk about...
They're playing the long game there, right?
The sanctions and, what the sanctions are, what they're designed to do, and what
China should invade
effects
Spain.
they're actually, I think, having. Because sort of like in the military side, there are two major narratives right now, I think, that generally people think, and there's a lot of truth to it. One is on the military side that the Russian invasion has been not very, they're not doing very well. That Ukrainian resistance is a lot stronger than they expected, and that the military has seen all kinds of problems and apparently large casualties, completely unexpected. Now, that's a whole nother, I don't want to talk about that right now, but that's one big narrative. And the other narrative is that these sanctions are absolutely devastating and pretty much a one-way street, that Russia is basically being driven to the Stone Age or to kind of like rogue, walled off rogue nation, North Korea status from a, at least the big cities, a pretty wealthy
I'm not sure about it either, Sean. I mean, I will definitely defer to these guys when it comes to these kinds of topics.
And every sanction we add on it only.
I think, I don't buy the narrative that it's like Ukraine is on the verge of repelling the invasion, or that they have a chance of winning. I'm open to the idea though that it's not going as well as they were hoping it was going to. I think that's fairly uncontroversial. It's been more difficult than they were expecting. I think people are taking that and maybe trying to glean all kinds of things from that about how it's, we just need to send them more weapons and then they're going to be able to win this thing. I don't really believe that, but I'm not totally sold on this idea that it's going great. It's just everything's going great according to plan. I don't think that's true either. Who are the speakers here? Well, it's the Radio War Nerd podcast. with Gary Brecker and Mark Ames, and they're interviewing Ben Eris about the sanctions regime. It's costlier than Russia can afford to sustain. That's the theory, like Afghanistan in the 80s. Well, and this is the issue that I've been talking about, ICO, Rich, is that it seems like this has always been kind of what NATO was trying to provoke here. They want Russia to be mired in an Afghanistan-like quagmire, which is not going to be good for people in Ukraine. This is the problem. This idea that, like, we can save Ukraine and we can defeat Russia. Defeating Russia in this case involves sacrificing Ukraine. Turning Ukraine into an Afghanistan-like quagmire is going to be a fucking human rights disaster for people that are actually living there. So that should not be an outcome that anyone should be rooting for. Which just seems to be the only outcome that the West is interested in achieving.
Buries them even further, and I have a lot of doubts about exactly that. But anyway, we can talk about that. But first, if you could give us a rundown of sort of the sanctions, the major sanctions so far, and what they're
John Doe and not Brecker. Okay, thanks for
the first thing to
me.
say is yes, that we were shocked by Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but we've also been shocked at the sanctions that they've chosen to use, the speed and
Ico Rich, it can happen quickly if they make a deal.
For example, the Nord Stream 2
if they
gas
engage in
pipeline,
diplomacy and de-escalate.
Yep.
That Schultz, as you said, up
it can't happen if we keep pumping more billions of dollars of weapons into the conflict to create a massive fucking sectarian quagmire.
Germany was completely committed to this. This is a business thing. And what happened was that not only was it was supposed to be the last one that went in the most extreme situation, and actually it was the first one to happen. They came out immediately and killed it. And they've actually done it in such a way that they can turn it back on again. What happened was that there's a package of documents with the regulator. It's built, it's finished, it's full of gas, but it can't be used until the regulator approves it. And what they've done is remove one of these documents from the package, making it impossible.
What I would say is, yeah, it is up to the Ukrainians, but which Ukrainians? That's the question. Because I think that there are Ukrainians that just want the invasion to stop and would be willing to engage in peace talks. Even Zelensky himself, you could put in that category. Unfortunately, there are also very well-organized and well-funded militia groups that are not interested in having peace at all. There's also NATO and the West who don't seem very interested in peace at all either. So that's the situation. It's not about what Ukrainians want, because I think there's a difference between average people that just want the invasion to end, and there's the question of whether this is even an option that's on the table. Like we talked about this before. If Zelensky does engage in these peace talks and does agree to like enshrine neutrality, and to give up on the idea of joining NATO in order to end the conflict, there's this highly funded and organized and armed fascist element within their military establishment that has no interest in that kind of a deal. And I don't think people in the West are interested in that deal either.
For the regulator to approve it under European law. However, there is a possibility they can put this document back in the package and turn it on again. So they kind of hedged their bets a little bit. But anyway, it was the first one to go.
Right.
And there's reports that it's going to go bust because, it's dead in the water and it's never going to work and it's a company at the end of the day. The other one that shocked was SWIFT, the International Money Transfer System. And again, we kind of ruled that one out because it's so extreme. Because what it does is it makes it impossible for Germany to pay for its gas imports, and from Russia. And if Germany doesn't have those gas imports, then we would have an energy crisis, but 10 times worse than the one we've had in the last 12 months last year, which already has sent prices up tenfold. And what they've done with that by, they put these SWIFT bans on Sberbank and VTB Bank, the two biggest banks, which together account for more than half of all Russian deposits. And a big chunk of that, $280 billion, is hard currency deposits by companies and the people. And those, you can't use that money anymore. Your card doesn't work anymore. And so everybody's
my mother-in-law
rushed.
can't use her card. Yeah.
Yeah, and so everyone's rushed to take it out. But what you've done by doing that is you've caused a $280 billion run on the two biggest banks in the country, where the deposits, everyone wants to take every penny out. And that is fundamentally debilitating for a banking sector and dangerous too, because it can cause a crisis. And it's a serious problem too, because although they've got $280 billion worth of deposits, the banking system's only got $46 billion actual dollar cash. So they can't cover it. And that means the central bank has to step in and cover it. But then the central bank, and that's the third.
Okay, here's the thing, Ico Rich. We've litigated this a lot. I don't want to get into a big back and forth because I have less than an hour to go, and I want to listen to this conversation about sanctions so we can understand the impact of these sanctions. When you're talking about voters and the seats that they have, I think you're undercounting the power that these groups still have within the military establishment of the society. It's not just about how many seats they have or how much like official influence they have on the government. These groups still have a ton of power within the military establishment. And they're being, armed and funded and trained by the West in order to act as like a stay behind force committing like terrorist attacks and violent insurgency in the case of this kind of quagmire situation. I think it's easy to downplay this when you talk about the role that they have in the government, right? Their influence is trending upwards, and as we've heard from these guys themselves, they're counting on this conflict to increase their power. They're counting on this very conflict, which is working, by the way. It's working. They're trending upwards. Yeah. Their power and influence is growing because of this conflict. So, and I agree, actually, by the way. I think it's important to point out that like all of Ukraine is not fascist. It's not everyone in Ukraine is not a fascist or a neo-Nazi. I don't believe that, and I don't think anyone else here believes that. But I don't think we should also downplay the role that these groups play and the power and influence they have over the government, even outside of this sort of electoral system. They're disproportionately powerful, and they're gaining influence as a result of this invasion. They've been armed and trained and funded for the last 10 years. They're counting on a lot of this conflict and chaos in order to increase their power that they have in their society. And this implies that Putin is renazifying rather than denazifying Ukraine. And that's exactly why I think this invasion is bad. Primarily because of the human toll that's being taken. Civilians are dying, families and innocent people are being terrorized, which I don't support. And I think you're right. I think it's providing the NATO supporters in Ukraine and the NATO heads in the West with everything that they want as this pretense to escalate this conflict, which is what they always wanted. And it's been a gift to these Nazi groups we're seeing them being normalized in our society. We're seeing them on our fucking news every night now, talking about like the brave Ukrainian freedom fighters and stuff. So I agree. I think that's one of the consequences of this invasion is that they're gaining more power and influence as a result rather than less, which is what Putin's like stated goals were. 2% of voters, but every other picture of a Ukrainian holding a gun has Nazi symbology on their gear. Yeah, the media just can't find a Ukrainian to talk to in this case that is not affiliated with one of these groups. That is a problem. I'm seeing people in the West posting actual Ukrainian neo-Nazi rhetoric on social media, probably due to ignorance, but their influence is spreading in various ways. It's been a huge mask-off moment for liberals in our society in the West who are normalizing all kinds of horrible opinions about fascism. We're seeing like on Rachel Maddow the other night. Oh, Hitler was bad, but at least he wasn't prosecuting ethnic Germans and stuff like that, suggesting that it's like even worse what's happening now. This is all really, really bad. And I agree that the invasion has actually made this problem worse and not better. Anyway.
Sanction. And this one wasn't even discussed. It's that the reserves of the Central Bank of Russia in Europe have been frozen. Now, it was always clear that any money that they had in the States, say in the form of T-bills, was going to be seized by the States. But no one, and it seems here the central bank was caught out, Putin was caught out. They didn't expect that to happen. and they froze half of all the central bank's reserves, and it's got this insane pile of money of $643 billion. So they've lost over $300 billion overnight. It's gone. And if we come back to the banking thing...
Because they can't access it.
They can't get it. It's just been locked up. And large amounts of this money, 90 billion, I think, are actually sitting in the Bundes central bank, the German central bank. And they're just like, right, that's ours. You can't have it.
In what form are they sitting? For people who don't understand this, myself included. So what does it mean when reserves are...
Is the defaulting on Western loans going to be a problem for Westerners? I think this conversation is going to get into that.
It's sort of...
if we think this is just going to have an impact on Russia, we're sadly mistaken.
Like Euro bonds or something, like the central bank puts some of their money... Yeah. Okay.
It's mixed. I mean, you buy some Bundesbonds, you have cash in commercial banks on correspondence accounts, and you have cash with the central bank. If you're a central bank, you can deposit with the central bank. Because the problem with this huge money, this 640 that they had, is that you have to earn some interest on it.
Right.
Somehow, because inflation. So it's got to at least, keep the same value. So it needs some sort of return. So for a central bank to hold the reserves of another central bank, it gives you extra liquidity, which you can then use in your own system.
Right.
And you pay the other central bank for the privilege, and everyone does it for everyone else. And it's a way of preventing the slow attrition from inflation.
We already watched it left
and
hands
it's
too.
as safe an investment. And that's
way
the
ahead
thing.
of you.
That's what it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be safe.
As safe as it's possible to be, because this is your nation's, piggy bank.
Yep.
You can't muck around with that money.
Yep.
And then they took it. They just took it. And I don't think.
Well, see, that's a question I have. I wanted to ask you, as I've said, someone who knows nothing about finance. After the invasion, I have to keep recalibrating my level of cynicism, because clearly I got it wrong. And, normally I would think cynically, okay, the pipeline's turned off, but they haven't blown it up. They can just turn it on anytime they want. The money has been frozen, but it hasn't really been taken, or has it?
The frozen money's been taken. I thought the same. I couldn't believe. And there is some uncertainty here, because the central bank only reports its hard currency reserves with a 6-month delay, because that affects the currency markets. So if a central bank suddenly moved $300 billion from its euro holdings with the German bank to Chinese yuan, then you would massively move the currency markets. And moreover, everyone would get wind that something's up. So they only report with a 6 months delay. So it is possible that in preparation for this invasion of Ukraine, because, the Kremlin's been planning this for 14 years, that they actually rejigged the currency reserves in Europe. But from what we can gather, and from what we've been told by the EU, they didn't do that. The central bank, the Kremlin, wasn't expecting its European reserves to be seized, and it's 40%.
I mean, wouldn't the EU know? Because the EU would know how much they froze. So presumably,
they
right?
should know. Yeah. I mean, the central bank, the Bundesbank, if it's holding $90 billion worth of Russian money, it knows that it would know if it'd been moved. And so when they say it's 40%, we believe them. It's 40%, which means that the central bank was caught with its trousers down, because nobody thought this would happen. And that's the shock.
Speaking of taking money, I want to point out again how horrible the stealing of Afghan money by the U.S. is. Yeah, and it's what makes it extra ridiculous right now. The moral grandstanding that we're hearing from the West right now, and all the Western companies pulling out of Russia, and all the ways that we're banning freaking Russian pianists and opera singers and everything Russian. The amount that we're all united in really punishing this country collectively, to the extent that we are, while that is happening right now. We're starving millions of people in Afghanistan, millions of kids. In this it's sadistic. And then we have the fucking nerve to wag our fingers and get on our moral high horse about Russia. I mean, that is fucking absurd. And it's really grotesque and hypocritical.
That, because the seizing, freezing central bank reserves, that's a killer, because Putin's and Nabulina, the governor, has been building up this enormous pile of money over a decade and a half. And to get it to this enormous size, and then to lose half of it overnight, that wasn't in the plan. because
Right.
they were supposed to have lots of cash so that they could deal with all of the crap that comes down now. And they haven't. They still have enough. They actually still have a lot. But it's not the comfort zone that they had. It means that
doing it to a nuclear power is just
economy
insane. And this is a good point. It's like none of this stuff is de-escalating this conflict or is aimed at ending this conflict. Seizing the assets of central banks of countries is absolutely crazy. It was eyebrow raising when they did it in Afghanistan, but doing it to nuclear power is just insane. It's like they're literally pushing even farther to see like how far can we take this? Let's take this even farther. Let's see how far we can. Now that he's backed into a fucking corner, I'm sure that's what's going to stop this thing. I'm sure he's just going to say, well, put his tail between his legs and say, well, I messed up. Sorry about all this. Let's call a spade a spade. Like, no, that's not what's going to happen. They're literally pushing just to escalate even further. It's really fucking dangerous. It's a dangerous game of chicken here that's playing. World War III speedrun, yeah. It's fucking really dangerous.
The banking system is under pressure. That on Monday, Nabulana, the governor, she ordered all of the oil exporters are now forced to sell 80% of the dollars that they own to the central bank. So this is a crisis like this. I mean, we haven't seen that kind of thing since the 90s when Russia was bankrupt, where the central bank is forcing everybody to sell all their dollars or most of their dollars to the central bank simply so they have cash. So they can do things like bail out the banking sector, which needs whatever it is, $100 billion in cash dollars straight away to deal with all the people who are emptying their accounts at the biggest banks, which belong to the state. It's sort of, I don't know, I'm still trying to get my head around it. The phase, the change that we've gone through in 2 weeks, we've gone from a booming economy.
Sanction D's nuts, or as the French say, SANC-DER-NUEF.
Thank you very much, King Uendo, for the 17 months of Tier 1 and all the support you've shown the channel. I really appreciate it. Little outrageous with some of the comments you were making here. This is a family program, as you know. There could be kids watching this, so maybe try to keep that in mind. I do appreciate it, though. Thank you, King Uendo.
To a hermit state that's under massive pressure, that doesn't have money from,
Bray J, don't start.
In the space of 2 weeks, it's gone back to the 90s. And the scary thing is the direction of travel is back in time. So we're talking now about the 1998 crisis. It's worse than that. But the direction of travel is backwards. So we're actually looking at the endpoint of 1991 and recreation of the Soviet Union, those kind of relations.
Right. Well, I keep thinking that
ended very well for everyone. So
come on, a World War II invasion. This is not the 20th century anymore, but it's really starting to look 20th century now.
Yeah. Another takeaway. I mean,
like I've been
you
saying,
can understand why
destroying the Russian economy in the 90s gave you Putin in the first place, and now we're just going right back there. We're going right back there. The massive humanitarian disaster of the 90s, the way that it was completely destroyed by the West, that humiliation, the humiliation that we foisted upon Russia at this time, set all these events in motion, or continued the series of events that are already set in motion, but gave us Putin in the first place. And now we're just recreating the exact same conditions, very deliberately. And we're expecting that the result is going to be different.
I mean, you can argue that the reason why Putin went to full invasion to extreme is that if you believe in my step-by-step theory, and it's just a theory, then it makes sense for him to go to...
I can't tell if I'm off base, but whenever I bring up that cutting off a country culturally is a bad idea, I get blank stares. Maybe I'm wrong. A slap factory, I think you're going to fit in well here. It doesn't make any sense. And if that's going to be the norm, again, let's start sanctioning America and Canada. Let's start saying every American athlete that doesn't speak out against United States human rights violations should be banned. Let's start treating holding everyone to that same moral standard, including ourselves. How about that? If we're going to do that, okay? If we're going to say, every single Russian person that's not speaking out on this is somehow just going to be persona non grata. Okay, fine. Let's do that with America as well. Let's do it with Israel. Let's do it with Saudi Arabia as well. Let's sanction Israel. Let's every single fucking Israeli athlete or actor. Let's hear from Gal Gadot and make sure Gal Gadot is properly denouncing the horrific actions of the government that she supports and she was once part of the armed forces of. Let's hear every single U.S. athlete, the first thing that they're ever asked about in every single interview, to denounce American human rights violations. I've talked to a guy from Russia online, and he really doesn't like the war, but is pretty solidly blaming the West for the sanctions, and I don't blame him, and I don't blame him either. I do not blame him at all. Gal Gadot of the IDF. And yeah, I do know about the Hague Invasion Act. And again, we're expecting this to have a different result. We're once again teaming up to absolutely crush and humiliate Russia, destroy their whole economy, just not for oligarchs, but for the average person. Great, the average person in Russia can't get enough to eat now. They can't. Talk about McDonald's and shit like that. We make fun. I did a joke about this on Twitter. We make fun of that Russian guy chaining himself to McDonald's. How many people does McDonald's employ in Russia? How many people have jobs with McDonald's that now they just don't have anymore? All of a sudden, they just woke up and they can't go to their fucking job. We're not thinking through the consequences of any of this stuff. It's very emotionally cathartic to Russia bad, Russian man bad. Let's make sure that all these companies pull out. Let's make sure these sanctions are hurting everyone as much as possible. And we're not at all thinking through the consequences, not just with Russia, but the blowback we're going to experience here in the West, which is going to be significant. And I think this interview is going to get into. The Great March of Return in Gaza was horrific. The IDF just sniped them for walking. Journalists, nurses, unarmed people for months. And our government just literally clapped their hands like fucking seals while this was going on. And in fact, I suggest everyone watch Abby Martin's really brilliant documentary, Gaza Fights for Freedom, which is about this. And understand the ways that our government support this. We subsidize it. We send Israel the arms to commit these horrible atrocities. We diplomatically cover for them while they do this. Or say the common thing that we say always, what do we say? I've talked about this on the stream before. What do we say? Every single time Israel bombs Gaza, a prison camp, a open air prison camp filled with civilians and children. What do we fucking say every single time Israel bombs Gaza? The same goddamn thing every single time. Israel has the right to defend itself. I know they're bombing kids. I know they're bombing apartment complexes. I know they're just shooting journalists and nurses, unarmed people, maiming them and killing them, but they got a right to defend themselves, right? So, nothing we can do. And once again, it's interesting who has this right to defend themselves and who doesn't. Obviously, Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves. When a Palestinian picks up a goddamn rock and throws it at a tank, an Israeli tank, talk about tankies, and they get immediately killed, we say, well, he shouldn't have been throwing that rock. What was he doing? At the same time, we have Western media airing how to make a Molotov cocktail segments to encourage Ukrainians to throw Molotov cocktails at Russian tanks. It's fucking absurd. Do black Americans that are living basically under their own military occupation, do they have a right to defend themselves? These communities that are just they're occupied by a heavily militarized police force, arrested and harassed and beaten and killed disproportionately, to the tune of hundreds or thousands per year. Do they have a right to defend themselves? No. As soon as a black American picks up a gun and aims it at a police officer, it's fair game to do whatever you fucking want to them. And they were just defending themselves. The police have a right to defend themselves. But these communities that are under this military occupation do not have this right. What's this move bombing? Yeah, what's that? this is really interesting, Crowd Babes, but I got to get back to this interview so we can learn more about the sanctions.
Shock. Because he wants a deal. And he's got to put Zelensky and the West in an impossible position where I'm about to destroy your country. I'm about to kill tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Do my deal now and stop this. And they had these, the Kremlin said at the meetings today, the peace meetings, that we want a deal as fast as possible. But what the West has done is we have to cut this off at the knees, so we come back with extreme sanctions because, again, we want Russia to back down as fast as possible. Everyone's trying to get out of this as quickly as they can. So they've done the same thing. They've come with surprise extreme sanctions. But by doing that, von Leyen, who announced her sanctions, she said specifically, these are sanctions designed to degrade the Russian economy, to undermine it, to send it backwards, to destroy it. And the thing with sanctions is they are a diplomatic tool, and the way they're supposed to work is you put painful and costly sanctions on a country, but then you go into the negotiations because the goal of the sanctions is to get a country to change its mind, to reverse a policy, to undo something. And then the negotiations start, and the way with sanctions is supposed to work is then you take them off incrementally as you get towards your goal. But von Leyen said specifically, these sanctions are not like that kind of sanctions. These sanctions are specifically to destroy the Russian economy.
You had Saki bragging about this yesterday.
It's a declaration of economic war. We are now at economic war with Russia.
I think Americans in particular would be less surprised by that, because I think the long regime of sanctions against Iraq, in retrospect, was never designed to bring Iraq to any kind of negotiating status. It was designed to destroy the place.
Well, and there's an element of we have to be seen to be doing something. And we've said out loud, NATO said out loud, we're not going to war. We're not going to give the Ukrainians a single soldier. And they're on their own. And Zelensky gave a presser at the weekend, actually 2 days ago, where he's furious. He's like, you led us down this path. You know, we're putting our boys' lives online. It's our cities that are going to be destroyed. Push comes to shove. Our Air Force is going to be wiped out in 2 days when the real fighting starts. And you're going to do nothing. Close the skies.
See, and this is an important point. And I don't know if, what's their name? In the chat earlier, trying to find their comments. Talking about the concessions and talking about, they've suggested that they've said they don't want to join NATO anymore. They've already offered this concession. That I don't know if is really, can we say that when you have Zelensky himself out there right now? Iko Rich, I don't know if they're still there. Can you really say that, they've offered this concession already to Russia and Putin's not interested in it, when you literally have Zelensky going to U.S. Congress right now saying, where's our no-fly zone? There's going to Canada going, you need to do more. I know you've been sending us arms, you've been training these militias, you're sending us lethal aid. We need you to do more. He's begging Congress for a no-fly zone. That kind of contradicts with this idea that he somehow made this peaceful offer to Putin to withdraw from NATO. This is kind of contradictory, I think, if he's out there begging for a no-fly zone and still begging for NATO to intervene. Right? This is kind of this is the sense that I get that I've been talking about lately when it comes to Zelensky, is that it does seem like he was, as John Mearsheimer pointed out in 2015, Ukraine was led along this primrose path, and he seems to have bought this idea that if this did escalate, NATO would have his back, and is now lashing out because he's like, what the fuck? Why are you not helping now? Because it seems like he was under the impression that NATO was going to help him out. Zelensky wants a no-fly zone, but Biden doesn't. I don't think Zelensky wants it of NATO. I think the West essentially told him no. Yeah, that I'm not sure, because I think you still have people that are trying to prolong this in the West. I think if that was an option, Ukraine guaranteed out of NATO, the West would be saying that right now. Wouldn't they be saying that? Wouldn't the West be saying no, we're saying no, they're not going to join NATO. we absolutely guarantee this won't happen. But they're not saying that. They're just escalating it. That's the kind of contradiction that I'm seeing here.
And he said in a shocking quote that every death from today onwards is NATO's fault, not Russia's.
That's what I mean. He's pissed off. He was like, "Where the fuck are you, NATO?"
Because you haven't come to our rescue when we needed it. And so the point I was saying about the economic war is that we have in effect, or at least even if it isn't our intention, whatever, Putin's going to see it as an attack, economic war. And he
said that.
Mentioned this. He said it already, has he? Because they've said it before.
He said it was akin to an act of war. He didn't use the exact same language that he used like for a no-fly zone, which he said was basically, we're going to respond with nuclear weapons. Like that is war, and this will go up nuclear very fast. But he used language, as far as I can tell, as close as possible to saying, and it is an act of war. Of course it is.
It is. It's an economic act of war.
Yeah. But I think sort of the unwritten rules of these things, you can't respond, I think, who knows now, but, to sanctions with nukes. But
so given that we've declared economic war on Russia, in effect, that the new Putin that we've come to know in the last 2 weeks, the one that doesn't muck around, the one that just goes straight to extremes.
No, he doesn't. He does not muck around, this guy.
To get his deal means that Russia's going to come back with counter sanctions, as it did in 2014 when the EU slapped sanctions on Russia.
And they're already doing that. They're sanctioning Trudeau and they're sanctioning Biden and all these people, which is deserved, actually. And that's the thing. It does make NATO look like a paper tiger. And that, I think, is a big part of this, right? They're engaging in this sanctions regime that's going to have blowback in the West. It's not just going to destroy Russia. It's going to have all these horrible consequences everywhere in terms of the global economy. But they're doing it because they feel they have this impotent sense of like, we have to show that we're doing something. We've got these bloodthirsty liberal journalists yelling at us about how we're not escalating this to nuclear war. We can't get NATO involved. So we have to like engage in this extreme economic warfare just so it seems like we're not impotent and that we're not a paper tiger. And they're doing that regardless of the fact that this is going to have massive blowback on ourselves as well. They're destroying their own precious global economy in this process because they can't just admit that they don't have the power and influence that they once did. It seems like it's a big part of this, doesn't it?
Came back and banned the import of all EU agricultural products to Russia. And so we
sawing off the branch they're sitting on.
Right. Which is the main thing you notice. No cheats.
I remember that.
So you have to assume that Russia's going to respond with counter sanctions. Mm-hmm. And in 2014, they banned all EU agricultural products from coming into Russia, which was to hit EU in the goalies, in so much as that was a big fat business that they lost overnight.
Right.
But you have to realize in the meantime that Russia is now a commodities and agricultural superpower. Right. That it dominates the metal markets, it dominates the gas markets, it's the biggest exporter of oil in the world. But in the meantime, it's also the biggest exporter of grain. Mm-hmm. In the Middle East, you've got countries that, are sort of 20, 30% dependent on Russia for grain. If you take that out of the market, it can cause chaos across the board. When they sanctioned Deripaska and said you can't do business with Russia in 2018, the price of aluminium went up 40% in a day.
Wow.
And the US Treasury were told this is going to add 15 cents to the cost of every can of Coke in the country, at which point they backed off and actually lifted
that's why I remember they backed off, yeah. Side note, Deripaska threatened to sue me over my article in The Nation about 10 plus years ago, yeah. But anyway.
And interestingly, from this round of sanctions, Deripaska has been exempted from the beginning.
Wow.
He's not included in any of the lists because they're not going to go there again. But think, Putin's counter-sanctions, he's like, they already banned the export of fertilizers, which is already going to hurt the European agriculture sector massively because they're massively
and the world
on Russian.
I'm going to read this from Maxim Suchkov. Russia produces, I think, about a third of the world production of potash fertilizers, 10% of nitrogen fertilizers, and 20% of complex fertilizers, and of course is the largest exporter of wheat. And Egypt, talk about the Middle East, Egypt is the world's largest importer of wheat, and it gets almost all of it from Russia and Ukraine. that's a volatile country. We could start seeing a lot of chaos.
We've got a correspondent there, and the government's had 2 wheat tenders in the last week, and they had 1 bid from France, which was insufficient. And they've got 4 months in reserve, and they're going to run out.
The Democrats are just going to get fucking demolished.
They're going to skyrocket.
Even more so now, I think.
Then we're talking Arab Spring territory.
Yeah.
That's what started the Arab Spring, was rocketing basic goods like bread going up. So that's just grain. I mean, palladium for catalytic converters. It's Russian. That's mostly Russian palladium. It's the biggest exporter of that in the world. So your electric car industry, dead. Copper, another one. Those prices just hit fresh all-time highs this morning, over $10,000 per ton.
Talk about song off the branch we're sitting on, like we were just saying.
To build each one of those like charging stations for an electric car, you need 8 kilograms of copper. And the 2 biggest mines in the world are both Russian.
Really?
And so you're
I didn't know that. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's across the board. I mean, nickel, same thing. Palladium,
nickel, definitely.
Aluminium.
We haven't begun to scratch the surface of what this is going to mean in our economy.
Titanium. The airline industry is going to run out of titanium if they can't get it from Russia, because again, it's the biggest source of titanium in the world. So when he comes with the economic sanctions, which we're expecting any day, it could get very bloody, because if they hit back as hard as Europe has hit them, then there's a whole bunch of things. Because it's basically, look, at the end of the day, Russia, what does it do? It supplies a whole bunch of very basic inputs to industry. That it's not, it doesn't have a monopoly on these things, but if it redirects it all to China or wherever, Brazil or India, its friends, which are huge countries, and the emerging world is
keeps up long enough.
with Russia or sort of not against it. That's half the world's population. That's half of global GDP.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you're going to leave the advanced countries suddenly with like massive supply problems. But then that means huge inflation, which is already running high. And so then it's going to feed through to the consumer. And so you start to see a scenario building here where we don't know the details or how it's going to work. There's too many moving parts. But, you know, when we're sitting in our armchairs and saying, oh, poor Ukrainians, they're dying for our values, but actually my life goes on and we're not actually going to fight.
Kremlin source, get fucked. Okay? I don't care. I will not ever apologize for being skeptical about Western media and these national security fucking psychos. Okay? I'm not the only person that was surprised by this dramatic escalation. Okay? I have been completely open and honest about this. I'm glad that this situation for you is an example, is a way for you to get your own personal catharsis and to feel good about your own self. You know, good job, good for you. I don't fucking care though. I'm not going to stop talking about the role that the West has played in pouring gasoline on this fire in the first place, and provoking this entire conflict very deliberately. I'm not going to apologize for being skeptical about Western media, these fucking pathological liars in Western media and the national security establishment. These are ghouls and monsters. They're liars and murderers, sir. And you can come here and do a fucking end zone dance about this. I don't give a shit, though. I am not going to change my analysis on this. I'm not going to apologize either for being skeptical of these people. Fuck off.
That's not going to be true. We're going to start having problems at home, and quite severe problems.
It seems like, I mean, as you detail all these impacts, it starts to sound like one of those crazy Confederate generals like John Bell Hood, who just, everybody attack all 20,000 of you against the embankments. And normally I assume the people who run things, they're horrible sleazes, but, they have a sense of what the money wants. And this is almost like they don't even care what the money would want.
Look, I think what's happened is we've started a war, and it's going to be fought economically to begin with. But we've started it on the assumption that Russia is weak and pathetic. And yes, it's got a big army, but if it just destroys the Ukrainians, then poor Ukrainians, lots of them will die. But at the end of the day, we're not going to compromise our principles, and it will cost us nothing.
Right.
And it's always been that calculation. We can demonize Putin and it costs us nothing.
Right.
Because he's a basket case and I can say what I like with him. I don't have to accept diplomatic norms. And what Putin's done repeatedly has shown that he knows how to make trouble, that he punches above his weight. And actually, they can do something, they can actually do quite a lot. And now we've gone down the road of declaring economic war, in effect, that if he strikes back and starts using some of those tools, the dependencies that we have on all those basic inputs,
sorry, Chai
that
bureaucrat.
actually we're going to find it.
I know it's a
he
family
can do a
program.
lot of pain, that they can do a lot more to us than we think. And so that it will cost us something. And actually, it'll cost us quite a lot. For example, you're going to be paying 15 cents more on your can of Coke because to get Russian aluminium. And if he removes that Russian aluminium, then you're actually going to struggle to get cans of Coke. Because they're going to go back to putting them in glass bottles or something. You know, this is going to be, and companies are going to complain like hell. And it's a war. If you start a war, you can't start it on the assumption that nothing's going to happen to you, particularly when you're not dealing with Russia, because it's not Iran, it's not Syria, it's not a basket case. It doesn't count. It's a big, huge, rich, powerful country which is deeply integrated already into the commodity markets, into the financial markets. And Europe, I don't know, they're talking about the euro.
My kids would totally love Rob if I let them watch.
Dollar, pretty soon.
Wow. But you're making a really great point here, which is I've noticed a lot of gloating and, as they say, hubris on the West side, the anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine, but really just pro-West side of things, which is
where did we hear from some
Russia's
of these fucking losers in our chat sometimes?
Basket case than we had given it credit for, and they're heading, to North Korea style basket case, and they deserve it, and it's all their own fault. But just no sense at all. I mean, you and I have been there, so we've seen Russia at its most basket casey probably in its history, at least for 500 years or something, by 98 or so, it's like what we said, the Russian military couldn't have defeated the Jamaican bobsled team at that point. It just seemed so pathetic.
It was fun at the time for us, but not for the Russians.
Horrible for
And they remember this too. They remember this shit.
So the idea of also just dismissing them and gloating over, today, now the reality today is now the reality from here on out, because it's a reality I love. Like we've seen, Hitler made that mistake. Napoleon made that. Like it just gets made over and over. Speaking of commodities, I'm just another small example. We haven't even really talked about gas and oil yet. Reading this off, Russia accounts for 80% of the markets for sapphire substrates.
Podcast.
Thin plates made of artificial stone, which are used in opto and microelectronics to build up layers of various materials such as silicon. They're used in every processor in the world, AMD and Intel included. Russia's position is even stronger in special chip etching chemistry using ultra-clean components. Russia accounts for almost 100% of the world's supply in some of the rare earth elements that are used for the chip etching. So, as you say, like they can massively disrupt. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how Russia's going to get cut off from high tech, but they can cut off all the inputs that go into making technology.
Is this subverting the paywall? I didn't even realize that.
This could get ugly. Go ahead.
Actually, my favorite one of all those is Russia.
I actually did not know that.
Is the biggest exporter of raspberries.
I just typed Radio War Nerd podcast into Google. I just went to the website.
Raspberry desert as of this summer.
There will be some great
subscribe to the
porridge for the
podcast.
next decade.
Subscribe to Radio War Nerd.
I love raspberries.
Yeah.
So
this was free. Okay.
This
good.
attitude that
still subscribe to. It's a good podcast.
It's the cost of denigrating Russia, of criticizing it, of demonizing it, that's gone on for the last 15 years, pretty much since Putin came to power, or at least the end of his first term. It means that there's been no attempt to understand or to acknowledge the enormous amount of progress that it's made, that the industries
it's all
it's
goose.
created. It's some world-class companies.
What's that, Red Scary? It's all goose?
Like e-commerce. If I was to ask you what's the most valuable tech company in Europe, what would you tell me? You'd probably reach for, I don't know, Google Europe or something like that. It's Yandex. It's Russia's
It is Yandex.
search
I was
engine.
gonna,
It's by a long shot. It's worth, or it was last week, it was worth 11 billion. It's like 6 billion this now.
Yandex
but it's
is the Google for Russia plus an Uber for Russia.
Google. Yeah, and it's 60% market share. And it's, Yandex Maps is superior to Google Maps. And they keep doing this. And the retail companies, the strategies, the internet integration they have are like far ahead already of things they have in Western Europe, but also in the commodities. that it's deeply integrated in the global markets, the commodity markets, and the investment and innovation into things like steel, the specialist steels that Russia's producing.
Like Rich, that's when you get into the kind of weird thing that's happening in the conservative movement, where there's this like,
and because the narrative,
there's this
because our politicians read our newspapers,
where's my fucking
the narrative that they see is like it's a basket case run by.
So the weird thing about the conservative movement right now is you have this like openly pro-Putin element of the conservative movement. That's kind of the one thing that might throw a wrench into that, because for sure the conservative, the right is taking over in America. I mean, there's I don't think there's anything that anyone can do about that. I'm not sure what better means in this context. Yeah. So I don't. It seems a certainty at this point that the right is going to be taking control of both in the midterms and in the next presidential election. I would be shocked if that's not the result. Will they be pushing for more direct conflict? Possibly. I feel like they'll be pushing for more direct conflict with China. And then you have this kind of openly pro-Putin segment. Who knows what that's going to mean? I don't know. Like I said, maybe I'm taking a little break from making concrete predictions for a while. The unironic Putin good crowd. That's right. It's like we're forcing Russia and China to ally. Well, that's been a lot of what's been going on over the last couple of years, right? You know, there's a long history of mistrust and conflict between Russia and China. And we've literally, with Western belligerents, we've pushed them together, which is not a big, firm ideological agreement that they have. There's a lot that they disagree on. But with our own belligerents, we've pushed them together into this kind of alliance. It's pretty amazing, actually, that we've done this. The West has in any way. Along with all these other, we're creating pretty much this whole this whole anti-Western alliance between all these kind of disparate countries that might not have gotten together otherwise, with China, Russia, Nicaragua, Iran, Venezuela, all these countries that have felt, and Cuba, all these countries that have felt the pain of sanctions and felt the pain of this economic warfare and imperialism. Now they're all going together, even though they don't always totally agree on stuff. But they're creating this kind of like India. India's an interesting example too, because it's been a Western ally as well. But now you have India kind of dipping don't want to say the word, but they're kind of like moving in that direction as well. We're literally forcing them into that with our own fucking Western chauvinism and belligerence. I'm very much enjoying podcasting listening party with this stream. Yeah, it's been good. I should do this kind of stuff more often. It's a good way to. It's good content for the stream. I do have to go in like 5 minutes though, so we can't. There's still 40 minutes left in the podcast. Let's listen to the next 5 minutes, and then we're gonna have to kind of say goodbye, and maybe we can listen to the rest tomorrow.
Correct. Surrounding Putin and nothing good there.
Yeah.
And then if Putin starts taking that stuff out, people are going to start to realize that, oh, actually, I don't know. I mean, like the technology that flies airplanes, it's written by Russian company, Luxor. And the same with the technology, the software that runs cars, the car computer in your car it's Russian. A lot of that's Russian. And bought from Russia, this Luxor, this company they spun off to deal with their international business.
I didn't see the poem either, Sincho.
And I think people have underestimated
Is there a video of it?
Russia's ability to fight back. Having said all of that, yes, it is still a lot of problems, a lot of corruption, that it is still a small economy, whatever it is, 4% of global GDP. But Putin has shown himself, one of his talents is making trouble. He's really good at it, and he's going to work out where he can make trouble, and he's going to make trouble. It's going to be painful, and I think we've started a war that we're going to regret. It's one that we will win, but at this point, nobody on the Western side is prepared to pay anything for this fight.
I don't know if that would be
and when
TOS.
Putin
That's a good idea.
Extracting a cost, I think people are going to have to recalibrate. But then, having said that people have dug their heels in, that what Putin's done is so beyond the pale with, the first invasion since the Second World War, a major one, that it's I think they're going to have to try and sell it to their populations that, actually we have to fight this fight and you're going to have to suffer. But then aren't you going to get a political problem where the population of Germany is like suddenly, why is my bread 3 times more expensive?
Yes, you are going to get a political problem from that. Absolutely.
Who we're not going to actually invite to join NATO anyway.
I know. That's the
so
whole...
why don't... That's the
absurdity
irony
of this thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Who's going to blink
Why
first
don't
here?
we just tell the Russians, yes, we're not going to... We guarantee they're never going to join, so my bread can go back to normal prices.
Like, we may actually have a nuclear holocaust to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, which won't allow Ukraine to join anyway. It's just the right to join a club that it can't join.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre in that way.
In principle.
In principle,
and we should be explicit here that there is no intention to allow Ukraine to join NATO. That it's not even on the table. It's not the offer. And that's exactly what the Russians are asking for. So all we need to do is write that down on a piece of paper.
Ico Rich, I mean, we're talking about living in the West. What has been the West's response to these like very mild COVID restrictions over the last 2 years? Do you think the West has handled being inconvenienced very respectfully? Have we come out of that on the other side of that with a lot of dignity? We've really handled all these restrictions for the greater good. We've really availed ourselves very nicely over the last 2 years. I'm sure though Westerners are just going to be thrilled to pay all these higher prices and gas and all these and food and all this blowback because of Ukraine, because of the right for Ukraine to join NATO. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, no, we must do this because Putin bad. We're fine to be doing all that. We're going to pay for all this extra for goods and all this stuff. I'm sure they're going to really handle that very, very well. It's going to be an absolute shit show. It's going to be a fucking disaster. We went so crazy over COVID restrictions, which barely existed. It's literally like, hey, can you please wear a mask at Applebee's? When you walk in the door, when you sit down and eat, you don't have to wear the mask, and then that's fine. And we're just like, no! Oh! And that's been our response to that. And we're going to say, oh yeah, we're going to pay all these higher prices for bread and gas and all these different goods, all the different ways that this is going to have blowback for us because of fucking Ukraine? No. Absolutely not.
Before I introduce them, I got this message this morning from Bono. And most of us, we're always, whether we're in Ireland or here or whatever it is, Bono has been a very Irish part of our lives.
Yeah.
And he said
Same.
This. He said, "Oh, St. Patrick, he drove out the snakes with his prayers, but that's not all it takes. For the smoke symbolizes an evil that arises and hides in your heart as it breaks. And the evil risen from the darkness that lives in some men, but in sorrow and fear, that's when saints can appear, to drive out those old snakes once again. And they struggle for us to be free from the psycho in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky." About that. Once again, and they struggle for in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky.
Oh. Oh. Oh, man. Oh. My face hurts. My face hurts.
But in sorrow and fear, that's when saints can appear, to drive out those old snakes once again. And they struggle for us to be free from the psycho in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky.
Join the Discord. I'll be back tomorrow noon, okay? Talk to you tomorrow.